No, the health officer is only trying to fill the patient.
So if there are folks here that haven't, there's a sign-in sheet on the little lectern by the door. If folks haven't signed that, please just put your name and information on there for us. Helps with the minutes so we know who was here.
Yeah, would you just throw my name on there? It's being recorded. I mean, like it will show I was here.
Good luck tonight, Rob.
Hmm?
Good luck tonight.
I know. All right,
Start the recording.
sure.
Recording in progress.
All right, I'll call the January 10th, 2024 City Council meeting to order. Do we have any agenda additions or changes? Staff? Or...
I do not have any.
I assume that an update about the repercussions of the storm last night will probably come toward your comments, but I'm wondering if we can get that maybe at the beginning about what has happened in the city since last night's storm.
Sure.
Would that be possible? Is that okay?
I don't see any reason we couldn't do that in public to be heard. I don't think we need to
That's
amend
fine.
the agenda for that,
Okay.
right? Anybody? Sure. All right, without any additions or changes, move on to public to be heard. So a little while ago, a few weeks ago, the council adopted a slightly modified meeting policy, which includes the change that, well, in the past, we'd have public to be heard, which is a time for folks to address the council or bring comments or questions. And we asked those comments to be on items that weren't on the agenda for the night, thinking that items that were on the agenda, we would talk to you about them at that time. We've tweaked the policy a little bit so to make it easier for people to attend the meetings and then leave, so they don't have to wait for a couple hours for the topic to come up. That's all to say that if anyone has anything they'd like to share with the council or any comments or questions, either in person or online, now is the time to do that. For each item we talk about tonight, there will be time for public comment as well, if you'd rather wait. So I don't see anybody in the room. Looking online, not seeing any hands being raised initially. I'll give it another few seconds.
So
Correct.
Craig, if you, Craig, could share your last name with us and then let us know what you're thinking.
Sure. My last name is Dwyer, and I live on Taft Street. And I know I've attended many meetings. I'm not someone who usually attends meetings, but I want to make it concise and to the point. I'm aware that I brought up to the city council the decision to stop and toll fines for the livestock at 8 Taft Street. But I want the city council to know that that's not reciprocal. More livestock has been added and structures have been built without regard to the city ordinances. And I would like the city to address that. And then I just want to say something short. That's an overview of this whole situation. This absurd situation that exists today, over 50 livestock being present at 8 Taft Street, is the result of the city council's lack of action over a year ago, when there was a dozen livestock. When the city council was made aware of this, the city chose to look at this as a micro problem by not addressing it and spending a year's time to look into it. This has led to a macro level situation, costing the taxpayers money and time with a lawsuit, and costing the residents of Taft Street and Drury Drive their quality of life and real estate values. Quite succinctly, if someone had 12 doves in this situation, or hogs, or goats, or elephants, and the city took a year to address it, thinking it's a micro problem, it developed into a macro problem. And it affects me every day because I have to listen to the over 50 livestock. So I think this is any organization needs to address a micro level problem before it becomes a macro level problem, which is what we have before us today. You gave time, and the individual or the 8 Taft Street has then registered itself as a farm. And now you find yourself in the news and it just became a macro problem. So any organization must address issues at a micro level before it becomes a macro one. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Is there anyone else online? We're not seeing any other hands up. All right, seeing no one else, we'll move on to,
You want me to just talk about the storm?
sure, sorry.
Yep. So we had a number of trees down throughout the city and some cleanup work on the public works side. Nothing too crazy as far as I understand. On Harlan's side of the world, we had roof damage at the library and estimated to be about $60,000 worth of damage, and damage on the rec climbing net estimated to be about $50,000. We are working on getting those claims into our insurance, and hopefully that will work out.
We have a temporary repair being made tomorrow on the library roof.
Is there any water infiltration?
Not that I can tell, unfortunately, that particular roof, the way they built it, there's a wall and I can't access the inside of it. I tried to look with a light, but I can't tell at the moment.
Okay.
So I'm keeping my fingers crossed and we'll do a little more exploratory as we get into it, but we're gonna be faced with a tarp repair on that roof for some time until we're able, because of the weather, be able to do an actual repair and or hopefully replacement. I think it's time to stop playing with that piece of it, just get it replaced, and enough of it came off that I don't see it making sense to repair it, that piece of it should be replaced. So
Okay.
I'll work with the insurance company and see where we go with that.
Quick question on that.
Sure.
Was it ever so possible to be the part of the roof that needed to be replaced anyway?
Yes.
Eh.
I might have done a little tiny happy dance at the same time. But yes, it is part of the roof that needs to be replaced. Has been recommended to be replaced.
Well, maybe insurance will help with that.
We'll see.
Okay. Anybody else? No.
No,
Okay.
thank you.
All right, we'll move on to 5A, discussion with HR Director Colleen Dwyer. Colleen, if you want to come up to the hot seat table, either way, either way.
Great.
Either way.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm not really completely sure how this kind of goes, but I'll just follow the sheet that I have.
Sure.
Unless you guys have questions.
We'll probably have questions. If you can kind of give us, we've probably read this, I'm sure.
Okay.
So you can give us an overview
Sure.
quickly.
So the first part of this is looking back on the past 6 months, and just wanted to acknowledge the personal growth that I've had as an HR director here. This is this realm of HR is new to me, and it definitely has pushed me to grow professionally, and has challenged me mentally every day. So that's one thing I wanted to acknowledge. And then, I think when I got here, it was as a result of the separation, and there is some complexity around being considered a new city when I am looking for old documents to inform the new city, and so it gets kind of tricky in having to navigate what it means to be new when it's not necessarily really new. Does that make sense? I don't know who I'm talking to. You guys? Are you guys?
Us.
Okay. So there's that. I also wanted to acknowledge a stable workforce. I think EGRP is a challenge to find long-term employees, not because of EGRP, but because of the child care crisis that we're experiencing not only in Vermont, but nationally. And the people who have left EGRP recently, it's never because of their work environment. I could say that definitely the last 3 people that left, built some connections with staff there and probably will remain friends, but moved into positions that are more in line with the degree or the experience they had. We just not too long ago did open enrollment for our health insurance, and I hope that I'm proud of the benefits that we have for our staff. It's really an indication of providing quality, affordable health care that our staff deserves. And then not too long ago, just really connecting with Champlain Medical Urgent Care to do flu clinics for our staff. They make sure that our public works folks, EGRP and wastewater are Hep B vaccinated. So that's been a nice, easy collaboration with them. I can pick up the phone and say, somebody got hurt. I'm going to give an appointment. They just send them. I send them right in. It's pretty. I think they're treated pretty well when they go there. In terms of like looking ahead and looking forward to be having contract negotiations completed and hoping for that to be done in what I think has so far been a positive atmosphere, and the end goal is to hope that we can get this done that demonstrates both sides of respect and understanding from where we're coming from. Trying to be really intentional about that. And then really giving staff more tools via training, whether it's de-escalation training, management training about performance management, CPR training, things like that, just to give staff the things that they need to be successful. And I just want to like really acknowledge the staff here. All the services and resources that are provided in this community are powered by humans. And I think we are lucky that we have dedicated, hardworking, honest, bright, committed people who really make this community vibrant. And without them, you wouldn't be able to access like a beautiful park like Maple Street that people from outside of Essex Junction, access, or like clean streams, or just having a safe place to go to the library, the fire department taking care of your life. And, there's like all this invisible work that's also done in this building by staff who do it with dignity and integrity. And I just feel like I want to acknowledge them, because without them, this city would look very different.
Great, we agree. I think
Yeah.
I can speak for everyone here.
100%.
Does anyone have any questions for Colleen?
Hi.
Hi.
Can I ask you to talk about two things? One, you made the comment about the people who've left. Sounds like that impacting EGRP the most, especially our kids programs, the early childhood education programs. That being said,
Not necessarily early childhood education. That staff has been incredibly stable. It's the after school programs. And that's the preschool not having turnover really speaks to Christina and all of the staff there that create an environment that people want to stay.
so how do you see us this year then moving forward, trying to maintain these services for an important and vulnerable part of our population?
Yeah.
How do you see us being able to do that? Or do you think that there's some real red flags here that we need to, some other things that we need to do or consider as we think about, again, because we're looking at the budget, we're talking about these programs. What lens should we look through this in order to determine whether or not we can sustain these programs?
Sure. I mean, it's really, go back to the people who are doing the work and really making sure that we are providing a good work-life balance, which I think they already do, providing competitive rates for positions, providing quality benefits, And I think it's a bigger problem to solve with the childcare crisis. I don't have the answers to that. I don't know, but I do know is like making sure that we put our people first.
How do you, from the point of view of somebody who's looking for an opportunity and looking to the city at maybe being an opportunity for them in a career, what would you say to them are the things that make working in this city attractive?
For EJRP particularly, or for in general?
Generally
Yeah.
speaking.
I think that there's a lot of opportunity to learn, to grow. We do have, right now, we have excellent benefits. It's a environment in which people are welcomed and respected. I don't think any system, whether it's a family system, a workplace, is perfect. Everything is flawed. So, for some people this doesn't work. But I'm not trying to say like everything is ideal here. But I think people take pride in their work, and I think that can be infectious. I think getting thank yous and acknowledgments can go a long way for people, especially coming from city council, coming from residents, appreciating the things that they do. I know that nothing is perfect. There are things that people don't know what staff has done behind the scenes, but everybody is really trying their best here. And that's a nice place to be, because when you come here, I never have felt like people don't want to be here.
Thank you.
No?
I always felt our staff was absolutely fantastic. And even though we have rebuilt our staff, we went down to very few people in Lincoln Hall. And now we have a brand new staff, which how many cities get to do that?
Right.
And we've been really fortunate. We have a
Yeah.
wonderful staff.
And we're lucky for the folks that have been here pre-merger. I mean, when I don't know what the right term is.
Separation.
The pre-separation, their knowledge and wealth of information and the support they have given the newer staff has been really invaluable.
I don't have any questions. I just have a lot of appreciation for all the work you and a lot of other folks have done to get us to this point and handle the transition, both as being a new employee and managing all of that. I know it's very complex, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that it? I can
That is it. Yes, you're done. Thank you.
see you in Zoom.
Do we want to open the department head? Do we want to open that for public questions as well?
She's gone.
My apologies for not asking.
It didn't occur to me to do that, but we couldn't in the future. We can move on to 5B, which are interviews and appointments for Bike Walk and the Community Advisory Board. Why don't we start with Bike Walk? We have 2 candidates here in person and 1 on Zoom. Why don't we start on Zoom with Sarah, if you're ready, Sarah?
Hello.
Is it okay with that? Hi. Thanks for joining us. I'm just going to get to your application. Great. So again, thanks for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about we have what you've written here, maybe just in a nutshell of what you were hoping to accomplish, your reasons for wanting to participate in the Bike Walk Committee?
Yeah. Well, as you know, we recently moved to Essex Junction, and I'm kind of eager to be a bit more engaged in the community in some way. And I felt like this was one way maybe I can contribute, because kind of having a city that's walkable and very accessible for pedestrians or on bikes is something that's very highly valued by our family. And we moved here from a community which was very like lots of people out and about walking and biking to various places, and you got to know people and see people, and it just felt like a very welcoming environment. And that was one reason that we chose Essex Junction, just because there is sort of a little city of some sort, and we could walk to the library and things like that. So I think that just kind of being aware of what the current challenges are for Essex Junction, coming in as an outsider, I would be learning some of that and just hoping to contribute in some way with ideas or just making progress happen, I guess.
That's great. I mean, so you came from a place that was pretty well set up in this regard. You've been here a little while. What, right off the bat, have you made any observations that we might benefit from? Anything that you've experienced where you lived before that you'd like to see considered here?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a little hard to sort of make big changes. I think one thing that kind of drew people and families out was just the number of playgrounds that were around and within walking distance. So any way to add more spaces or green spaces where families can hang out, I think would be great. I don't know too much about what available spaces there might be as being a newcomer, but that was one thing that I think really brought families out and people met each other and stayed friends. And we already have a lot of great local businesses here, and it would be, great to see people really walking to these places. And, I haven't seen, we also had the advantage of having this road, which was actually, there was a path for walkers specifically, and that was kind of unique, and so that also drew a lot of people because it was like a wide path with sort of dirt pebbles, and people could walk their dogs and that kind of thing. But again, it's hard to know kind of how to fit that into what's going on here, but take some creative thinking. But those are just, I guess, some things that I observed living in that neighborhood.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for?
You asked a question I was going for, so
Okay.
thank you.
Amber? No. This is kind of a question we typically ask. If there's 2 positions and 3 applicants. Would you, if you're for some reason not selected for this, would you consider participating in another committee? We have openings on a number of different opportunities that are available.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, like I said, I was hoping to sort of become a little more engaged now that I live here. And this one sparked my interest, but certainly would consider other options too.
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us. We will probably get back to you with the next day or so.
Okay.
We'll talk about this, I think, as a group as part of the meeting later on, and you'll be hearing from one of our staff.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's see. How about? Sorry, scrolling. Michael? And because I have a name that often is mispronounced, I'll ask you to say your last name.
Sure.
So I don't-
Jaguar.
Jaguar?
Got it.
Right, thanks.
All right. Hello, and thanks for having me, everybody. Sure. And thanks to the public for being here as well, participate in City Council. So I was interested in this council in particular urban design and specifically sustainable urban design has been a huge personal passion of mine recently. So in addition to my goals of being more engaged with my city and my community, was hoping to use this committee as a way to work with others that have more experience in urban planning, to use as a springboard to potentially look at a different career path down the road, looking at master's programs in urban planning. And I think this would be a great way to get off the ground, kind of get some experience, see how others work together on solving problems as it comes to biking and walking. It's a really exciting time for the fields. I mean, we have the opportunity to be leaders when it comes to developing safe, walkable communities, livable communities, especially being such a family-oriented place. I come from Michigan, from a part of the Midwest where I'd say walking and biking infrastructure is pretty lacking. And so it was pretty sad to see that. And so to move to Essex Junction, it's been really exciting for me to see what I see is a huge opportunity to build a network of walkable and bikeable communities. We've got relatively dense housing for Vermont. We've got relatively dense areas that people want to get to, whether it's shopping centers or parks or playgrounds. So I think that's a perfect opportunity to look at how people get from place to place and go from there. On top of that, I'm excited to see other urbanists become interested in not just changing car infrastructure, but maybe reframing it, especially being, obviously built around five corners. I have no grand delusions that we're taking cars off the street, but to think more holistically about how we can get people from place to place, regardless of financial status, mobility, any other issues. And again, thinking about maybe kids wanting to get to school by bike more often and make that safer for them as well. So those were my primary interests in applying to this committee.
Sounds great. Anyone? I'll ask the same question, Sarah. You mentioned recently arriving from somewhere else. I mean, well, actually, you described it differently as their infrastructure was bad, but I'll still pose the same question. Do you have any ideas of immediate improvements or things that, now that you're living here, could be improved? Anything that you'd like to address right off the bat?
Sure. I think sitting in on the Bike Walk Advisory Council a couple months ago, a member of the public pointed out Pearl Street as a place for opportunity when it comes to cyclists in particular. And I'll echo that. Being someone who spends off days running errands on my bike, I find the sidewalk is the safest spot as a cyclist. And that definitely, again, communicated to me that there's an opportunity to look more holistically, especially the second section across from, the shopping centers over there. Those are places where people would want to get by bike. So, and to reframe it as in the same way, looking at my hometown, they're putting in more protected bike lanes. So again, thinking about how we can make things safer for everybody is my primary interest.
Excellent. Well, I'll say the same thing I said a few minutes ago. We have one more person to interview, and we'll be talking about this later on this evening. So we'll be getting back to you with the next day or so.
Sounds great.
Thanks for. Oh, sorry.
Interest in other committees?
Oh, right. Sorry. And if you were not selected, would you be interested in joining us in another way? There are some similar opportunities on other committees that might interest you in the same way.
Sure. I'll be perfectly honest and say that based on my professional goals of looking at sustainable urban planning, I had my sights set on this council in particular.
Okay.
But appreciate the offer as well.
All right, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And John O'Brien.
Good evening,
Thanks for
everybody.
joining us.
How's everyone doing?
Good. Good.
So I've applied to this committee for a lot of the similar reasons as the other folks who are applying. I love walking this beautiful community, observing the historic architecture, sharing that with my children. We recently moved here about 1.5 years ago, so I have that also in common with the other applicants. And as a relatively new city, there's just a lot of potential in kind of building up this downtown area and making it all the more accessible as a destination location, not just for the folks living in the city, but also to those outward who we certainly want to share this community with. With the introduction of more restaurants and grocery to this location, I think it's all the more important that we look at this from a lens of equity as well. There are folks who walk recreationally and bike recreationally, and then the others who do out of necessity. So that's another angle that I would certainly bring consideration to on the committee. As a parent of young children who is always making my way around the city, walking when possible, I would love to just see the future and the changes that we can make now at the forefront of all the decisions made by the committee or by the advisory group. And I see linking parks throughout the city as an ongoing project that I see a lot of potential in. And yeah, I just see this as my also into civic engagement in my new city.
Great.
I was just curious, one of the things that one of the questions that could potentially be asked to some of these applicants if they've been part of the planning commission or the, what's the new planning, or strategic planning process, if they're aware of it and if they've been involved in it.
Okay, thanks. That's a good point. What was I going to ask you? Similar question that I asked others. Your recent arrival, anything that you've noticed right off the bat that sort of sticks in your mind that is...
Well, we are at Five Corners. It's right out the window here, which is intimidating for a lot of folks who are attempting alternate transportation. And so I think planning events specifically around making the downtown region a little bit more accessible, I think is going to open the door to people having a mindset that the infrastructure exists currently, and the door is open for those who are willing to brave what might seem to be an intimidating thing. So walking tours, bike aspect to parades and community events, these are the kind of things that I see as an invitation to further engagement.
Excellent. Does anyone have any questions for John? No?
No.
Amber? Are you open to other opportunities?
As stated, this is kind of my interest. My interest is in this committee specifically, but as I am looking to get more engaged civically with the community, I am open.
Okay. As I mentioned, the other folks, you'll be hearing from us in the next day or so. And as Harlan pointed out to all of you, and Sarah, I hope you're still on the line. It doesn't look like it, but that's all right. On the 27th, in the morning, there's an opportunity, and in the afternoon, there's an opportunity. This information's on our website. At the fairgrounds, the Blue Pavilion building, there will be, what are we calling it?
Open house.
Sorry, open house, excuse me. An opportunity to kind of learn what's been talked about in the strategic planning process that we have and offer feedback. In the middle of the day, there's a community meal where we will be talking about and holding a public hearing on what we have so far for a proposed budget for next year, which will include some of the topics that you're interested in. But so there's an opportunity to participate in the morning or afternoon. They're the same. And then in the middle of the day, there's a community meal and budget presentation. So everybody here is welcome. We hope you all attend. We'll expect to see every one of you. But thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. Back to the memo. And for the Police Community Advisory Board, Susan French, wouldn't mind coming up. Thank you for joining us.
Sure.
If you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself and what your interest in this committee, what your thoughts are on that.
Sure. So I have lived in the Junction for about 6 years. Prior to that, I was in Burlington since I was a little kid. So I have, I feel like a good history of the community that I'm in now and the broader Chittenden County community. My background is I'm on hiatus at the moment. I'm not ready to say it's early retirement, but I don't know what I want to do with my life. So, but I'm a chief people officer by trade. And so I have a lot of experience in training with inclusivity and diversity and equity as it relates to the workplace. And in my personal life, I have 3 adult children. One is a child of color, and we have some really difficult conversations around how she feels or doesn't feel safe in Vermont. And then my youngest child graduated with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and is now afraid to join the police force because of the environment that is at play today. And I have always found the community that I was raised in and the community that I've recently been living in to feel very safe from my place and perspective. And I feel like it's an opportunity for me to get engaged and strengthen the relationship between community and police. Not that it's one of weakness, but I think there's always an opportunity for greater collaboration and communication. And so it's an area that I am passionate about, and I feel like my background and expertise would lend itself.
This has been up and running now, I want to say I'm going to get this wrong probably, but I think it's about 4 months, maybe 5. Do you have any concerns about jumping in?
I do not.
Okay. We appreciate you coming forward and to fill this open seat, be considered for that. Have you followed up? Have you, sought out minutes from past meetings or talked to anyone on that committee?
I've done some surfing on the internet, and actually I was, it reinforced my thinking, which was, I looked at police logs, and I had not done that, and records of arrest. And, in my mind, those numbers were going to be larger than they were. And so I was pleasantly surprised. And then that took me down a path of sharing data with the community that reinforces the great work that's being done and maybe quells some anxiety and just opportunities there may be for that. Again, I feel like I could leverage my background in support of that kind of work.
Okay. Anyone have any questions? Sure, Elaine.
I'm just curious if you, in thinking about joining this committee, is there 1 or 2 ideas that you would like to see the committee do? Like, what is your vision of what you would accomplish on the committee?
Right. Well, I've learned that it would be premature of me to throw out 1 or 2 ideas now until I sort of had a better understanding of what goals have set to date and what their accomplishments have been. In my feeling, as I come forward in my thoughts about joining such a committee, it is to strengthen my understanding and my perspective of the community and how it's functioning with the police department. And it's to take that knowledge back out through my networks and through my community to reinforce positive aspects of the work that is being done, but not to be naive to the opportunities that exist. And so when I think about the work for that committee, I really think it comes down to communication and transparency and driving both of those things forward for greater awareness within the community of the work that's being done.
Marcus.
I want to go back to something you said, and I really appreciate the fact that you're an engaged parent and having those difficult conversations with your children. And I totally want to acknowledge the fact that the national conversation is relevant and one that we need to have. I'm curious about, in your conversations or in your thinking about this committee, when you look at what's happening here locally with the Essex Police Department, do you believe that the national conversation is relevant? Do you believe that the Essex Police Department is on the right side or the wrong side? Where do you see the direction, right? From your point of view as a resident, as well as a parent, how do you see the Essex Police Department in that?
Yeah. So I'll answer the first one because I think that's the easier of the two. And as a resident, I have nothing but kudos for my experiences in the last 6 years. And I think that they're present when necessary. I think that they are a reassurance. I think that they are, they appear to be focused. You know, I've seen things, I have not participated. I've seen things where you can go and have coffee with the police chief, right? And I've seen things in the paper and online that suggest that they're looking to engage with the community, and I think that that all bodes well. And so my experiences have only been positive. The second part, I do not perceive that we have problems at the national scale level. However, I am a educated white woman of privilege, and so I'm not going to make that assessment without really understanding more. And that's part of my journey, is wanting to understand more about how our police work within our community, what advocacy exists, what opportunities exist. Those conversations for me and my child, who is 25 and a Black female, is she's still scared to be pulled over. Because has she ever had an issue? No. But the reality is, every time a highly publicized case happens throughout the country in different parts, it triggers a lot of emotion and a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety. And I do my best to have an adult conversation and appreciate and understand that her perspective is different from mine. But I'd like to do more. I'd like to understand more and have more educated conversations with not only my children, but the community on the ways in which our police organization has safeguarded against those biases, and the fact that it's front of mind.
Thank you.
Or do you feel that you're able to, based on, you've said it a few times that, well, I'm asking this question because of how you've answered a couple others. Do you feel like you could turn around and call out Essex Police, the Essex Police Department, if you see them operating in a way that you question? Because that is also part of their mission. It's two-way.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, my professional background, I am able to be direct, and I'm not going to use the word confrontational, but I will not shy away from a challenge. And so if there is issues that warrant further being addressed, and even if they are icky and maybe they don't feel so great, I will definitely be there to be a part of that conversation and work through it.
Great. Anybody else?
Am I an applicant of one for a position of one?
You are.
Okay.
You
Because
are.
I'll tell you that I'll help out elsewhere, but I didn't know if I didn't want to steal
Well,
your
you don't want to
thunder.
get too far ahead of yourself.
I didn't want to steal your thunder.
And you heard the strategic planning part. But yes, that's nice to know if you're willing to do something. That's great.
Yeah.
If you're willing to double up also, we're also open to that for anybody who wants to do two things for the community. Many of us do. But thank you. We'll be in touch soon.
All right. Sounds good.
Appreciate you coming.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Okay. I believe that is it. So we'll move on to 5C, discussion and consideration of adoption of Vermont Alert as a public notification system.
Okay. So sorry, let me just get to this memo. This bookmark's not working. Is there a memo in here? There it is.
Yeah.
It's after the other thing. Okay, sorry. Okay, so VT alert system. It is a system that individuals can sign up for on their own to get alerts about various emergencies. The system has been in place for quite a while at the state level. And it's just a really great way and an additional way that the city can communicate out any issues or emergency alerts that we may want to get out to the public. Police Chief Ron Hogue is here. Actually, I think he might have been here for the other thing if he has anything he wants to add. But essentially, he is suggesting that both the town and the city make use of this VT alert system. I think it is also a fantastic idea for us to do this. And there is no cost outside of the training and the programming and getting folks set up. Essentially what this would look like is the police department would use this. Ricky, Public Works would also be trained up to use it. Ashley, also on our staff, would be trained to use it as well, and myself. That's all I got.
Great. Chief Boyer.
I would like the Essex Junction Fire Department to be a part of that as well. I mean, we put out a number of public notices. Right now we use Facebook and Twitter. So, I mean, I think we should be included as well.
I'm not I don't know how it normally operates, so I'm going to ask if that's a possibility, how that works. Is that
I'm sure.
great?
The town with the fire chief on theirs.
Okay, yeah, just it's not in the, well, it's a lengthy list, but I'm not sure if it's, so I just want to make sure that
It's not. I've actually taken the state course.
Okay. All right. Chief, did you have anything you wanted to add? Chief Hope?
No, I don't have a problem having the fire chief in there. That might have been an oversight on Rick Gary's part when he was making the initial list just for your memo. That's certainly appropriate, and in the town we will have the town fire chief. So yeah, we'll make sure. The city, once signed on to this, can add any user that they choose to put in there. So.
And I apologize, it is in the list in the very second section. In terms of permitted uses, fire structure, fire vehicle, fire, wildfire, all, and so on. So,
yes.
I have a, in the examples of organizational group notifications, it sounds like this can be used internal to an organization as well.
Yes, yes, that is correct. It can be used for notifications of employees, for, scheduling things like that. If there was a sudden callback of all the employees had to come in for something, that's one of the functions that we plan on using it for with the police department. Is if we had to get every employee of the police department to come back into work for something going on, this would give us a way to be able to notify everyone quickly. So you can make a list in there, for instance, the city council. So that way, the city manager can send a notification just to the city council if they choose to.
Okay. Any questions from anyone? Amber, I can't see you. No, I can see you. Nothing? Okay.
I subscribe to the Chittenden County one, and it's great. So
Okay.
I'm glad we're going to do this.
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question for Gina?
Yeah,
That wind notice that we got, did that come from that alert system? About the pending storm? The
No.
only reason I ask is because I forwarded that to our child care services, and we planned for that windstorm. Obviously, the park has a lot of trees in it, so they made sure that they didn't have to keep the kids out into the park area when the wind was coming in. So these types of notifications are extremely helpful for all of our programs and all of our departments to plan accordingly to keep everybody safe. So.
And residents opt into this, or anybody that wants to receive them, this opts in. And I'm assuming that personal information that's provided as part of that, the cell phone or the app, whatever, all of that is kept confidential and not intermixed with other government databases and uses.
Yes, I believe that's part of the MOU that's signed. And the state VEM is the organization that manages the actual system for the whole state. So they would be the keeper of the information. And I don't believe that we as individual users or even as the city would have access to that, but I don't know that for sure. But that's certainly something we'll ask them about while we're doing the training.
And I'm sure there's a privacy policy for people when they sign up that they can review. So,
I believe so.
okay. All right. Well, if there's no other questions or comments, Virginia, do you have anything else you wanted to add for that?
I do note, except for that, this piece of paper needs to be.
Okay, that right. You're gonna need to remind us a few more times. There is a motion, no, recommendation.
Do you want to take public comment first?
Hmm?
Did you want to do public comment first?
Oh, thank you. It felt like we did, but yes. Is there anyone in the room or online that would like to comment on this topic? I don't see anyone in the room. Give a second for folks online if they have anything they want to add to this discussion. And I don't see anybody, and I see a recommendation, not a motion. So we can turn that recommendation upside down.
I'll go ahead and move that the city council approve the use of VT alert system for the city of Essex Junction and authorize the city council president to sign the attached MOU.
Second.
Great. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion passes. Great. Doing it now before we forget.
Thank you. Okay.
5D, Winooski Valley Park District presentation and discussion. George, is that why you're here?
I think Nick Warner and.
Okay. Okay, great.
Lead the discussion on that.
All right.
Sure. Nick?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't see that. Okay. Hi, welcome.
Hi. I don't know how to make my image come up. Can you guys see me there?
Nope. See your name. There you go.
There we go. Thank you. And Lauren Chicote is here as well. She's our operations manager. I'm the executive director of Winooski Valley Park District. We each year like to visit our member communities, of which we have 8, and you're the newest one. And as you know, George Tyler is your trustee, serves on the board of trustees that meets monthly. So he's very much wired into our operations. If it's okay, I'll give you a quick 5-minute overview. I believe you have all the materials that we went over with the report, so I won't belabor you with a whole lot of details straight off of that, but some important points for this year. Just a quick overview. We've been in existence since 1972. We just celebrated 50 years, a year late because of COVID, but we had a very nice celebration. We have 3 full-time staff. I'm executive director. Lauren is our operations manager, and we also have Tim Larned, who is our park superintendent. I came on board with the distinct privilege of having these 2 people already working here. Lauren has been here, I believe, for 13 years, and Tim for 22. So there's a lot of experience there. We also have usually 2 or 3 summer seasonals that work for us, who are highly capable. And a huge part of our model is leveraging hundreds of hours of volunteer time each year to conduct a whole broad variety of things in our parks. We are growing incrementally over time. And the park closest to you that would have an impact is right across the river at right across from Global Foundries. It's called the Jacob property. It's a 29-acre park, and we're working with the town of Williston on converting that into a park district asset. I tell my dog to start barking, but hang on. There. He has great timing. This year has been challenging to us in terms of the flood events, but it also taught us quite a bit about the level of resilience that our system has built into it, and also the importance of the floodplain and shoreline and wetland properties that we manage in the overall scheme of things, in terms of both achieving better ecosystem health and also the whole broader issue around climate change and flood resilience. So it's interesting how our mission has evolved, as it was originally formed really as a buffer against the fears in the 1970s of Vermont being completely overwhelmed by development, and really has morphed from that aesthetic recreational priority into a much more focused ecological imperative that that sounds grandiose, but our board is really quite aware that we have a responsibility that we're trying to carry out. So it provides a partnership of towns that can very efficiently acquire and directly manage permanently conserved lands. All of our properties have some form of legal protection on them that makes sure that they stay in conservation for perpetuity. This year, we are doing some significant capital upgrades. One of our parks is Ethan Allen Homestead. We've got a couple of historic buildings there. We've got a couple grants to work on those buildings. One of our next big projects will be historic buildings at the Colchester Pond property, but we're also going to be repairing a wetlands walk, and we have a lot of trail projects going on. And all of these major capital projects, we leverage funds through Land and Water Conservation Fund, Vermont Housing Conservation Board, Lake Champlain Basin Program. So a big part of our model is leveraging funds to do major capital projects and acquisitions. And this system works quite well. Vermont is unique in that it does not have strong county government or funding. And if you look nationwide, most organizations like ours are funded through sort of very quiet taxes. We feel we have a stronger model, but it also depends on the towns to provide funding for our operations. This year, we made a strategic decision that has been building up over the last few years to go after outside operational funds to help supplement our budget. So if you notice, there is a $20,000 placeholder in our budget for next fiscal year. And the board has tasked me formally to go out and raise that money. We already have one grant application out, and we're also going to be working with Vermont League of Cities and Towns, which we are a member because we are a regional municipality. And we're going to be speaking to them about approaching the legislature for some form of funding that could carry us into the future. It's a bit of a long shot, but we feel, I've been doing this for 10 years, and I feel like as the imperative for our work grows and the cost of our operations creep up, that having some other form of income would be extremely helpful. So that is a big imperative for us right now. Another one is keeping our costs contained. This year, we managed to ask for a 3% increase in our ask from our member towns while our overall budget is growing by 6.4%. So you look at those numbers and say, how do you do that? Well, it's a combination of things. First of all, we are very entrepreneurial we do contracted work for various towns, which is a very simple model. It's easy contract, but it's for properties that are not owned by us. We get paid for that. Another one is we do quite a bit of leasing. We've got a preschool we lease to, two different museum cultural organizations, a couple of farmers, and we have some nonprofits that we work with. So we are constantly looking for opportunities to increase revenues over time to help take the financial load off our member towns. That being said, even though I'm a biased person here, I do feel that for the investment and our overall operating budget, the product that we deliver is pretty significant. And I feel like we do a really good job of managing our properties. You own a portion of Woodside Park. Congratulations. It's split between the town and the Junction. That park was hit hardest by the flood in terms of depth of water. We had 9 or 10 feet of water down there. And then we got a second flood with a very similar amount, although nowhere near as high as the first time. And we were able to essentially, with elbow grease and not a whole lot of money, put things back together again. And each time we do that, we learn a little more about how you contain a floating bridge and how you make things flood resilient. And we'll get insurance for the major bridges and walkways, but the overall cost to cure everything in our park system was less than $30,000 post-flood. So, and we learned it's just a constant iterative process of learning how you manage these lands. It's clear that our priorities are changing, but the overall system as it's built and how we are structured and doing right now is quite sound. We carry no debt whatsoever. We have monthly credit card fees, but we do not, which we pay off each month, but we do not take out loans for our vehicles or for our properties. We have really strong strategic partnerships with a number of organizations. The combination of those two things, staying efficient, staying tight and small, having strong monthly input from the member towns, is what keeps us sustained. And over this next year, we've got a couple of properties that we're looking to do an acquisition on, our capital projects, and of course, securing additional outside revenues. So I jumped around a little bit on that, but any questions at this point?
I do not have any. Anybody?
I'd like to, I want to bring up something that brought me some concern. This is only
sure
to understand the structure of the funding model ask that you put for all the communities.
Yes.
One of the things that brought me some concern is, again, as I look at this particular ask and you're looking at it from a population standpoint and breaking down, our participation, the fee for our participation in this. And I know the community voted overwhelming to be a part of this district, but looking at the amount of land that is within Essex Junction that the district takes care of brings me a little bit of concern for the level of participation financially versus the amount of land we're covering in your whole district. And, you're talking about projects that are being done in other communities. So I just want to at least acknowledge the fact that brings me some concern, and I will leave it at that. If you want to comment or address that concern, feel free, but just one of the things that I was thinking about as I was going through and reviewing this.
Sure. I appreciate it. And just to modify things a little bit, we also take into account the equalized grand list. And Mike, in the formula, is that 100% progressive? No. Is it more progressive than just divvying it up 8 ways? Yes. We did have a very intense look at our financial model about 6 years ago. We hired a consultant. We did a lot of runs on how it would look if we did things on, if we had the amount of acreage of land in each community as part of the formula, and it just blew the whole model out of the water. So I don't have a perfect answer for it, but I can tell you that if my board chair was here, who's been here a lot longer, she would remind me, she constantly reminds me, everyone has access to these parks. There is no fees charged. The whole philosophy is that the ecological values of properties cannot be defined by municipal borders or property lines. So when we evaluate the acquisition of a piece of property, the main factors are the importance to conservation, habitat protection, flood resilience, et cetera. And then having a board of 8 representing all those communities jointly deciding whether we acquire that property and manage that property over time, and then approving each operating budget. The model is strong. In terms of how we fund it, I'm not sure how much more progressive we could get in terms of how we structure this, but one thing I will say is I feel strongly that there needs to be another funding stream that comes into our organization to support the work we're doing, because the work we're doing has regional impact. Along with all the other incredibly active and strong conservation organizations that acquire and manage land. What's different from us is you get to tell us what to do, and we actively manage the properties. And there's a significant amount of conserved land that is not actively managed. And to me, there's a huge difference between those two. So that's the model, and I really appreciate where you're coming from. And I'm not going to totally disagree with you, but I think we do the best we can with the formula.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. George, go ahead.
Yeah, you had a question. You had mentioned something about a new property in Williston that's adjacent to Global Foundries. I'm wondering if you could talk a little more about that.
Sure. It is, it's hard to see without looking on Global Earth because it's kind of hidden, but it's behind those. If you go one neighborhood back from 2A as you're going towards Williston, along the river, directly across from the peninsula, the Global Foundries Peninsula, is a 29-acre property that's right on the river. It has been used informally by neighbors as a park for many years. There's been a lot of residential development. There are 3 relatively recent developments down there that have access from the back of their developments. We have been working with Trinity Baptist Church and Global Foundries and with the town of Williston, and are trying to find we feel the park won't work without an access where you can park the car and access the trailhead. So that's what our conversations with Global Foundries is about. It's not a confidential conversation, but we certainly have not come up with any kind of formal agreement, but they have basically given us a handshake and said, yeah, we're really interested in this. So that would mean another park that would have complete 100% public access 365 days a year from dawn to dusk, and would have a trail system that would bring you right down to the river. It's similar, I mean, in this part of the river, it's hard to have access. There's not a whole lot of places you can get down to the river. So this would be, I think, an important asset. So it's been a number of years. We had Trinity Baptist had a housing development that was going to provide that parking lot. Because of interest rates in the economy, they drew back from that. So we approached Global Foundries for a different location. So it's taken us 4 or 5 years to get to this point. But I feel like we're right on the edge of what could be a really good new asset.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I jump in? Could I just jump in real quick on that point?
Yeah, let me just see if Amber's got a question real quick.
Okay, sure.
George can go, that's fine.
Okay, George, sorry.
Okay, I might want to clarify here because for us, for city residents, the property that Nick is talking about would be very accessible. Walk down Park Street, go across the bridge, and the access would be sort of up and off to the, where right now we're on the right-hand side of the road. Williston there's a parkland that goes,
Right.
This would almost be on up and onto the left-hand side.
And there's a substation up there.
Right.
Okay, so you walk around the substation.
Right,
Okay.
it would be up and in there, so I'm very glad. So, and I just want to reiterate everything that Nick said. These are some of the most biologically rich and diverse ecosystems in the state, and preserving them for educational, recreational benefit is huge. And again, as Nick mentioned, this past year, twice, the huge benefit of preserving these areas was shown because they absorbed the overflow of the Winooski River with no further damage. These ecosystems were designed for that. I mean, they evolved over how many centuries to do this. And then they retreated, and the organization itself is extremely well run. The benefit of having this, and I appreciate what you're saying, and if we ultimately, if they can acquire more land here in Essex Junction, there probably are some pockets, and ultimately make a continuous chain of it, that would be great. But you have to have the structure and gradually grow the structure in order to have that. I think this is an excellent organization. I'm very glad to have been part of it this year.
Thank you.
Thanks, George.
Thank you, George.
So the memo indicates, it seems to indicate that we need to redo a reappointment or an appointment to the board. I don't know if I read that incorrectly, but the city's website does indicate it was only a 1-year term. So I just wanted to figure out if we needed to have a new agenda item at a future meeting.
Typically, it's 3 years. But
Okay.
But if you, I mean, it's up to the towns. The towns have the power here. I got to emphasize that. So if you choose a 1-year term, that's fine. But in our articles of association, it's a 3-year.
Okay, we might need to look into that because because the website does indicate that it's a 1-year term. I don't know, George, if you knew whether it was a 3 or 1 that you got appointed to.
I thought it was 3 years, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
I can look back.
Thanks.
Andrew? No? Okay. Regina, do you have anything you wanted to add to this?
I do not.
Okay. Great. Nick and Lauren, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate
Thanks for your time.
Appreciate the info. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. Take care. Thank you.
Well, actually, before you go, because this is my weak spot. Anybody in the room have any comments or questions, or anybody on Zoom have any comments or questions on the Winooski Valley Park District? Not seeing anybody in the room. Not seeing any hands raised online, which is predominantly staff at this point. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your time. Take care.
You too. All right, we'll move on to 5E, Green Mountain Transit presentation and discussion.
Thank you, George.
Take care, George.
Thanks, George.
Thought you're gonna stay for the whole thing,
I
George.
know. Where are you going?
Watch out for the podium. It can bite you.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us.
My name's Clayton Clark. I'm the general manager of Green Mountain Transit, and I appreciate being here to let you know on what's going on. And I want to check in to see, I can talk about transit all night. I spent about 2 hours with Bulliston last night. How much would you like me to talk? Because you want me just like a 5-minute overview? Do you want a 10, 15-minute overview? What sounds good to you all? Because
say that the bus to the town
Yes.
is going to run on a 20-minute schedule.
Oh,
as long as you can say that, you can go.
I would love to say that too, but
I mean, he's asking.
saying it is different than,
I
than
understand.
operating it,
I understand.
unfortunately.
We don't want to cut you short. Whatever.
Okay.
We deeply appreciate the service. We always want more.
I agree with that.
And so, whatever you think is appropriate to get us up to speed on what's new at GMT.
So why don't I?
Under 10 minutes. Let's start there instead of, because you worried me with the 2 hours.
And that was definitely a joke.
Okay.
And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through some of the items. I'm obviously going to talk about the assessment and if you have any clarifying questions, please ask as I go along. And there will be some opportunities if there's rabbit holes that the board wants to dive down into. We can do that after. But I'll keep things kind of shallow and more of a broad overview. And so just so folks know, Green Mountain Transit is a municipality. It's of the 7 public transit agencies in the state of Vermont. We're the only one that's a municipality. The other ones are nonprofits. We operate primarily, or I should say, our historical primary area of operation has been in Chittenden County, and then about a decade ago we expanded into Washington County, Franklin County, into rural. And what this means is that we're one of the few transit agencies in the country that has both an urban and a rural network. The federal government treats rural and urban transit differently. There's actually separate sets of rules. We have to keep separate books. And so in some ways, Green Mountain Transit is really 2 transit organizations that share a common board of commissioners and management team. So I wanted to talk first and foremost about ridership, because that kind of grounds things in why we do our business. That's getting people from point A to point B. And so the number 2 bus that comes through town is our second highest ridership of our urban routes. Last year there was 417,000 rides on that. Which comes to about 20% of our urban total ridership. Excuse me. We also have the number 10 that connects Williston and Essex together. That's a little bit less at 344,000 rides last year. and that's about 17% of our total ridership. Do recognize that obviously not everybody is getting on that bus, here in the city of Essex Junction, but that's the ridership for the entire route. So let's talk about the unfun part, which is money. And the assessment for this year is $249,000, and I'm really happy that that's only a 2% increase. And I'm going to walk you through a little bit about why it's 2%. This is a little bit less than we projected even just a few months ago, and I'll tell you the reason why for that. So if you look at our fixed route service, those are the buses that I was just talking about. Our fixed route assessment increased by 2.6%. Now, normally what we do is that we price we come up with a price for service, and then to help municipalities out with monitoring their budgets and keeping predictability, then we have just a flat 4% increase year after year. And so that you all kind of know, what's coming down the pike when it comes to a fixed route increase. What our Board of Commissioners decided to do, which we do on occasion, is we're like, hey, you know what, let's actually true up the costs. Let's, look at the amount that the service provides and get them back into to alignment. And so that's why the increase for the fixed route only ended up going up 2.6% instead of 4%. And so that's really one of the drivers for why we have a lower increase for this community this year.
Can I interrupt you and just ask a quick question? Are you basing this on population or ridership?
Right. We're basing it on the cost of the service.
So how are you coming up with our portion again?
And so essentially what we do is that we look at, so this route goes through multiple communities, and that we look at the amount of time that it's spent in that community, and then that comes up with a percentage that we then apply to our total cost.
Okay.
Yeah. So the good news is for your community, it ended up being a little bit less. For some communities, it ended up being a little more. Those will be less fun trips for me to make to different communities. So happy here in my hometown that it's a little bit less. Although I guess technically it's not my hometown anymore. I'm sorry. I forgot about the separation. I hope I didn't want to bring up any bad blood. So the other part of the assessment is capital. That doesn't change. That's just a $75,000 contribution towards capital costs that all of the municipalities contribute, and that percentage has not changed year over year. The area that we see a lot of volatility is with the paratransit assessment. So because of the Americans with Disabilities Act, if there is anyone that lives within 3/4 of a mile of one of our fixed routes, and they have a disability that prevents them from being able to use that fixed route, we must provide them with essentially door-to-door service. And that is contracted out through SSTA. The thing that makes it really variable is that there we're charging the actual cost based on the number of rides that are used. And when you have people who will say either move in or move out of a community, if you have somebody that's eligible for their service and they use it several times a week, over a year, just one or two people changing their locations can really impact the cost that municipalities have. You all were only having a cost go up 0.6%, which is, I wish that it was always, that small. I can tell you Williston had a 55% increase in their paratransit, and again, it's just driven by where people are and how they're using it. One of the things that we are doing is that our Board of Commissioners just decided to move to a new methodology so that to protect you all in the future, and that methodology will use a 3-year running average. And so that instead of having, peaks and valleys, hopefully that will then make it a little bit smoother. again, so that you don't have such a shock when it comes budget time. Looking at the pressures that GMT is under, I'm sure you'll be shocked to hear that it's, money and labor. Probably very much similar things that you all are facing, most governmental organizations are. When you look at the labor pressures, this is actually my 1-year anniversary day today. And when I arrived last year, when I would go out in the community and see our buses, there was a 1 in 3 chance that the person driving that bus was on overtime. And so we had a scarcity of drivers, which required a lot of overtime. And when it's forced overtime, our contract allows us to do forced overtime, which feels icky. But it's needed for us to be able to have the service. Those folks get double time. And so I'm really happy with the fact that we have been able to, even with that much overtime, still keep the fixed route cost as low as it increase as low as it is. One of the things that we did is that we opened up our labor contract with the Teamsters to modify the starting wage. We had previously had a lower amount for the first year of service. We decided to get rid of that so that it would just be so that people would start at the full wage immediately. The thing that was nice about that was that since it only really was an increase for new drivers, it meant that we were able to be much more competitive without having the entire workforce have a giant increase in wages. We really appreciated the Teamsters' flexibility in working with us. And that increased our starting wage from $21.50 an hour to $28 an hour, which has really done a lot to get that overtime rate down. It's now in the 20s. We are hoping for a 15 to 20% rate. And the hope there is that that's, again, just going to make our future assessments to you more predictable and less costly. When it comes to fiscal pressures, GMT, like just about every place else in government, we got a lot of COVID relief funds. I can tell you that we're still using those funds because the amount of service that we provide is more than the revenue that we have coming in absent those funds. But we are going to project in fiscal year 26, exhausting those funds. And by the time fiscal year 27 rolls around, we're going to have a projected $3 million deficit in order to maintain the current level of service. So obviously, as the general manager, revenue is one of my highest priorities when it comes to our future and finding additional revenue sources. And one of the things that I know we're not going to be doing is looking at municipalities as, the sole, source, or hopefully not even, much of the source when it comes to new revenue, because we know that you are facing similar fiscal cliffs likely. We are going to be doing, I had mentioned before that we're the only municipal public transit agency. We're likely going to be creating a nonprofit arm so we can start doing some fundraising. We're just looking at other things that we would be able to do so that in a couple fiscal years, that $3 million gap is going to be able to be filled without impacting your service. And if we're lucky, that maybe we'll find more funds that we can get to that 20-minute service, that you had mentioned to start. Fares resume on March 6th. We had used some of those COVID relief funds to have a fare-free service, and that has happened since 2020 in the early stages of the pandemic. The new system that we have in place will be much more robust than our old system, which really meant that you had to have cash or a pass that you had previously purchased in order to use the bus. The new system is going to allow people to, in addition to paying with cash, to use their smartphone, use a credit card, use a smart pass that they would be able to get from us. And the thing that we're really excited about is that even though, we love fare-free service because we like that there is no barrier at all for people to move around, or at least no financial barrier for people to move around. And when we came back to fares, we wanted to make sure that we would limit the financial impact. So we're kind of flipping things around. In the past, if you wanted the best price for riding, you would have to prepay for a monthly pass, and so that would mean that you would have to fork over $50 or $40, depending on when it was, in order to ride for a month. And we know that for a lot of our riders, that's just, that's too much to have $50 in extra cash in your pocket to buy that. The new system will track usage, and so that when it gets to $50 now, it just stops charging, so that for the month. So if somebody uses it, their monthly total gets to $50, the rest of their rides that month are free. So they get the same cost benefit of buying the monthly pass. They don't have to worry about buying a monthly pass and then not using it enough. And that will have both a monthly cap of $50 and a daily cap of $4. So if somebody needs to ride the bus a bunch of times for errands on a particular day, they'll never have to spend more than $4. If they are a discounted rider, so somebody that is between the ages of 6 and 17, somebody that is 60 or older, or self-identifies as disabled, all of those prices are cut in half. And so, and the thing that I want to emphasize is that it's just a self-identification. If somebody says, "Hey, I have a disability," that's the end of it. We'll code it in the system. They don't have to provide anything to us to verify. It's a trust system, and they'll be able to ride essentially unlimited throughout our region for $25 a month. And so even though it's not free, we think that's going to be a pretty good value. And I'll end on the future considerations. One of the things that I know that you're working on is finding a new commissioner for the GMT Board of Commissioners. And I really liked that you were it sounds like you are reaching out to your community to find somebody that has an interest in transit that would want to do that role. I can tell you that the Board of Commissioners, like you all here, like people who serve on governmental boards, it's rewarding work, but it's hard work. It tends to be about money a lot more than it is about transit, which is unfortunate, but that's sort of the reality. And we look forward to working with whoever you end up appointing. And lastly, something that came out of the split between the Essex communities is that there is a program that is operated through SSTA called the Older Persons and Disabled Transportation Program. And one of the things that we're going to want to work on is making sure that when we partner with SSTA, that program is operating as well as it can here. And I know that we have some work to do just because you're recreating, a lot of the things that because of the split in the community. And so that's something that we'll be working towards. And that's a program where SSTA vehicles are used to provide transportation for folks who are over a certain age or if they have a disability. So that's the quick overview. Sorry that I talked so fast at you, but I didn't want to spend too much of your time and was more interested in talking with you instead of talking at you. So what thoughts does anyone have? Anything that you want me to dive down?
Appreciate that. It was a great report. I'm just going to dive into some questions. A while ago, 6 months or more, there's a back and forth about making route cuts and timings that were established during COVID permanent.
Yep.
And there was discussion, I think, between you and I and some others about, and I had a ton of feedback and I still get questions from residents. We have an awful lot of people that work shift work at the hospital.
Yes.
And evening shift gets off at 7 and they're waiting 40 minutes for a bus.
Yes.
Or 7:15 if they get out on time and can do their handoff report if they're a nurse.
Yes.
They're waiting 7:20, they get down there, they're waiting till 8.
Yes.
The request was to try to add one more half an hour route at 7:30 to catch most of these folks. I don't have good numbers, but I think it's well over a busload, at least a dozen. And so I'm hoping that there's maybe some opportunity there to still look at that.
I can tell you that officially we are not considering new service or expanded service, but I will be meeting with the transportation coordinator of the University of Vermont Medical Center Friday morning, and we're going to be talking about this.
Okay.
And one of the things that we're going to need to look at is some of those numbers. We've had a hard time getting those numbers I've requested from the hospital, but I think this person's going to be able to get it for us. If we're just talking about switching a, maybe making a service a little bit earlier as opposed to an addition, I think that may be, more likely. One of the things that I can tell you in the year that I've been at Green Mountain Transit, and I don't have a transit background, I have a human services background, is that everything that I look at that's like, oh, that'd be simple and easy, it's like, that was a dumb thought. And I can tell you that, frankly, one of the challenges that we have is that connecting all of those routes with the driver schedules, and especially because what we find is that there's the peak demand generally is throughout the system, the peak demand. And so, but getting earlier, clearly, my wife works at the hospital. I think that she would, like to be able to do that instead of parking at Fanny, because the number 2 goes right by our place, and that would be easier for you. So I'm sympathetic.
And, it's bring up the number 10 again. Our service, even though it's not our community necessarily, impacts our families that work up in that area and work in Williston.
Absolutely.
I just don't get it. It's the numbers that you rattled, that you said before, 17% of the system, and it's hourly.
Yeah.
It just makes me think, what if it was half hour? It'd be potentially even higher. And again, respecting the numerous, aspects of this that I have no clue about.
Yeah.
Realizing the system is massive and complex, but I'm hoping that you all are pushing. I'm sure you're pushing the legislature as hard as you can. But
Yes.
I'm hoping that you're really kind of. It's just such a huge barrier. We're adding people in this community it feels like on a monthly basis, and those are major employment areas. And so I'm still a little not with you. I'm just flabbergasted that it's hourly. And not only that, but it serves our residents' ability to get to the grocery store, the big grocery store, and the big shopping center.
Yes.
And that is a huge barrier.
Yes. I don't feel that hourly service is acceptable in an urban area, just because it does make it a big. It's late and I'm tired. A disincentive to use to use it, and I could tell you that having higher frequency service across the network, would be something that I would absolutely be working towards if we can get that right. One of the things that is challenging for us is that we get graded by the FTA and on 6 different factors, and the good news is that the higher the grade, the more money that we get. But we already are rated in like the 85 to 90% of all small transit, cities, which makes it our ability to go and get more money from them. They're like, you guys are doing great. You're not a priority for us, and so that's where I think that Burlington area should really be proud of the fact that our service is as good as it is, but we know that it can be better. One of our newest board members is a former ambassador who spent their career living in Europe, and he's like, why doesn't this look like, there? And I agree with him, and we would love to work, towards that.
Well, it'd just be remiss if I didn't bring it up every chance I got.
I appreciate, yeah.
Andrew?
Just one question. You mentioned that the fixed route assessment is based upon the amount of time that a bus is within the community.
Mhm.
Does that count idle time or is that moving time?
It's not based on the like we don't use the GPS trackers, like to do that. It's based on the route schedule. So we know based on history that the number 2 at this time of day takes this amount of time to come through, and so that's my understanding is what it's what it's built on.
Great. Just given the number of times I see it sitting at the bus stop over here by the train station and the driver walking in to
Yes.
get a coffee, just wanted to
Yes.
make sure that that's equitable for communities like Winooski who are absolutely dependent upon that 2 bus getting there. And
Yes.
yeah, great.
And I'm aware of it because I dropped my daughter off at ADL, and I go through the 5 corners, twice a day, and I hate when I see my bus sitting there with, like, it's not good for anybody.
Back to 1 second. Sorry. If I know Heinsberg's considering potentially not contributing as much, and the way you model this, the members that their non-contribution or reduction in contribution
Mhm.
doesn't turn around and have to be picked up then by other communities that route doesn't hit.
No, that is correct.
Okay.
If they were to make that decision that that was best for the community, our assessment model would not do that for the fixed route or for the paratransit. Although I guess technically, how I said that there's a $75,000 capital, so that would change that slightly. But there we're only talking about hundreds or small thousands of dollars.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Marcus.
No, if nothing else, I want to reiterate some of the things that were already made. I grew up in Chicago. I have lived in other larger municipalities. And I just came back from Chicago and I had my venture card, my 7-day pass. It was great, with my phone, just blip go.
Yep.
But thinking about this and how I'm curious about how route development kind of happens, because I understand the position that GMT is currently in, but to get us to a place, because one of the things about living here for as many years as I have, one of the things I still feel like, again, with the timing of those particular buses, it's not convenient for most people. So even in a community that we consider relatively urban, it still feels like I need to have a vehicle in order to get to my active life.
Yes.
That being said, how do we change that paradigm? How does GMT help change that paradigm? Because I feel like if we're going to get to a place where a route will be worth the money for GMT to run, we have to kind of run it at a higher schedule just to get there.
Yes.
To have people get used to it. If it were running every half hour here out of, just speaking about this community and connected to others, obviously, but if we had a bus that ran every half hour going to the grocery store,
Yes.
and it ran long enough that you could start building up that ridership,
Yes.
I kind of think, especially as we develop a city that is more walkable, bikeable, multimodal, people will start using more.
Yes.
My fear is that the current GMT model is stagnant and it's not built or is building in a way that will transform and move not just this community, but the communities around us into being those multimodal cities that are communities that I think every community is talking about. Yes. So can you talk about that route development and how you look at that moving forward?
Well, I'm going to focus on it from the real driving factor here, which is not going to shock you, is money. And so one of the things that when you look at our FTA funding, the funding that we get outside of those performance-based things that we're almost maxing out is based on our population, not based on rides. And so I think that that's where it's going to be difficult to expand there unless we do what I think GMT, and I don't mean to be critical at all about our board or the previous general managers, but I don't think that we had enough of an entrepreneurial spirit. I think that we looked at it as, here's the money that comes in from the FTA, here's the money that comes in from VTrans, here's what our municipalities are willing to give us, and that's what we'll just take that and build a system based on that. I am much more interested in finding money sources that aren't from those three sources. I think that we've already maxed out those areas. Having come from the Agency of Human Services when I worked for the state, every single program that I worked in had transportation as a barrier for the people that we were serving. And so one of the reasons why I want to create that nonprofit is because an awful lot of the Agency of Human Services and federal grant opportunities are geared for nonprofits. And then that will give us the ability to apply for a lot more grants. And then that will then give us the flexibility to add to it. I can tell you there's a real hard problem when it comes to changing service, because even when you have a line that is not used very much, those people that are using it, have real opinions about changes to it and having it go away. And so I think that that's one of the reasons why you haven't seen a lot of changes in our route system, because it's politically difficult to make those. And what I'll end with is what you started with. So in Washington County, we are currently have reduced service because we had staffing departures that we weren't able to fill, and we just couldn't operate on the full schedule. What that means is that the city commuter that normally connects Barry to Montpelier is running hourly instead of half hourly. Well, it's moving a lot less people. And so it's not just that people are, okay, well, I'll wait for it to be on the hour. They're not using it.
Right.
And so I think that it absolutely speaks to the fact that the more frequent the service, then the more people will use it.
So, and I totally understand the stress there. It sounds like a self-fulfilling prophecy was set up for Washington County.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, looking at this, and I hope that the board will consider potentially a different approach or a look at a new approach about developing routes, because again, I think if it felt convenient, if it felt more accessible, more people would end up using it. And with the fact that fees are coming back, that kind of participation might help to offset some of the cost challenges that are happening. Obviously, other sources will have to be found.
Yes. And I should have mentioned also that there is, that the legislature is going to get a report next week for non-federal matching funds that can be generated within the state that would be used towards public transit. And even though that would be for all of the different transit agencies, GMT as the largest would end up getting, the largest bite of that new apple. And they are considering other things that will help us, hopefully, if the legislature is able to act, fill there. But let's be honest, we're also talking about new taxes and fees, and we have an administration that doesn't really care for new taxes and fees. So I'm not sure whether that will come through. And I guess I'm not even sure why I even brought that up. But I started meandering a bit. But I do know that we are thinking about, things, and and I guess that just, we recognize that we can't just look at the same old ways of funding this that we have in the past.
Yeah, I mean, one of the examples I'll put back on the table was the College Street Shuttle Burlington, which only ran in the summer, but I found to be extremely valuable. One, I live locally, but watching the people who are coming to visit Burlington using that particular service, and I know Burlington over the years has talked about trying to move cars out.
Yes.
So that would require people parking in parking lots like the one up at UVM and trying to transport in.
Yes.
That aside, I want to bring up one other thing, and this will be my last piece, but in conversations that we've had as a city about our changing services, we recently had discussions about some change in services with the senior center. And our relationship with the senior bus with the town of Essex, as you're aware, I'm sure.
Yes.
I do want to acknowledge the fact that we heard from constituents who were unhappy with the application process because it felt onerous and confusing.
Okay.
So I just want to acknowledge that. I think a portion of that was the involvement of the doctor and pieces like that. So
And so I don't know if it would be from Regina or Raj. If you could send me some of the specifics, to look into that, I'd be happy to look into it. I do know one of the things that has surprised me. I thought that I used to regulate long-term care facilities. My last job was managing Converse Home in Burlington, and I thought that going through the Medicaid stuff there was interesting, and moving to public transit, I've found that human services has nothing on the transit hoops. And so depending on when you look at somebody like SSTA, they are operating, you just see their buses and it looks like, oh, it's just a single service, and they're operating ADA service, non-emergency medical transport service, olders and disabled service, perhaps a mobility for all service, and they all have totally different criteria. They're not really consistent with each other because they're all coming from different federal or state silos. And it really, I feel like almost like in the human services community, where you need to have these navigators that will help people figure out, hey, this is the program that you need here, this is the program that you need here. It seems like the same thing for public transit because it's not intuitive.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Picking up on what Marcus and you just discussed, noting that you said earlier the new fare system will be honor-based, and you can just say, I'm a disabled person, so I get a discount on my pass. And yet this really critical service for seniors and disabled folks has multiple hoops, and it is onerous. We've heard many complaints. And so I would just echo the request to analyze that system and streamline it. It's too much for the seniors to have to navigate. On a separate topic, you had said earlier that it's difficult to change routes. And in FY27, you're anticipating a $3.5 million shortfall.
Yes.
Absent route changes.
Yeah.
So I just want to put a plug in there to say Route 2 and Route 10, don't touch them, please. Several years ago, there was an attempt to change the routes, both Route 2 and Route 10, I think. And Green Mountain Transit held some hearings in communities affected, and this was a standing room only room. And we were told it was the biggest hearing they'd ever had. They were shocked that people were so upset, and they ended up keeping the route. And that route is essential to the folks who live here. So I really just want to make sure that Route 2 and Route 10 stay the way they are. It'd be awesome to see them increase every 20 minutes, but at the very least, please don't cut them.
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who rides the number 2 bus, I mean, it's also the Fort, Fanny, the Winooski especially.
Yeah.
I mean, it's full for much of the morning and afternoon.
Yes.
And a lot of
once you get to past the Fort.
A lot of the folks who ride in Essex, they live fairly close to the route, and some don't have cars. It's their only transportation to work.
Yes.
So it's really crucial that that route stays the way it is.
Yes. And, one of the things that I want to, first let me acknowledge that our board is committed to expanding service. Sometimes that scares me because I look at them and I'm like, let's preserve service first, because they are still in a growth mindset, which I love. But one of the things that I recognize that we need to do is that we need to get earlier in the process when it comes to the development. And so I'm going to pick on, say, Burlington a little bit. And to their credit, they are working with us closely now on trying to come up with solutions to the fact that they have these new large housing developments where public transit was an afterthought after they were built. And so one of the things that we would want to make sure that we work with you all is that if we do see, changing patterns and where people are living along the route, that we get involved early.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I was going to say something along the lines of the town is looking at a completely new development up there where number 10 goes,
Yeah.
which is just going to, over the next 15 years, almost explode.
Yes.
We're adding in the hundreds of apartments over the next 5 to 8 years, 10 years. And I'm speaking for myself. I would rather add money to those routes than add money to parking. I really don't want to be spending money on parking, organized parking garages. I'd rather put it to routes and put it to public transit. That's just me, but having those conversations early and often, I think it's the only way we're going to get them increased.
Yes.
But
and there's been a lot of discussion about the difficulty in creating housing, and obviously housing is one of the number one, priorities, and I don't want to put another barrier there. But one of the things that we're also seeing is that there is a disconnect from the early stages of the permitting process, where a developer will say, you know what, we don't need to put in so much parking because we're going to have public transit meet this, and then they get the permit and we never hear from them. And so it's kind of like we need to be able to connect the dots so that if there was a commitment made during the permitting process, that once it's built, that actually comes to fruition. And I don't want to make new housing any more expensive, but there's the potential there that we should look at. If you're going to save money by not having to put in parking spaces because of those obvious costs, then maybe some of the funds that are saved there, would go into helping establish a new line. Because if you expand service, then you're not just adding additional drivers, you're adding additional buses, so there'll be a capital cost, that will be there, and those contributions would be great.
thank you. Does anyone else have anything else? Amber? No? Thank you for staying so long.
Oh, my
Appreciate it.
pleasure.
We're going to go out to the room and to Zoom, so please don't go for just a second.
No problem.
I saw Harlan with your hand up.
Yeah, I was just curious on, and I'm gonna pick on bus number 10. It's a 1-hour route. How is that organized? Is that one bus continuously moving? Does it take an hour to complete that route? Do we have buses sitting on one end of the loop and the other end of the loop?
Yeah. One of the things that I was really surprised when I came to GMT is I thought that's how those would work.
Yeah.
And what they most often they then go on to do another route. Part of that is the drivers like having the different routes. Part of it's just the timing where they may already have the other bus starting on the other end of the route, and so it doesn't always happen to be the case. There are some routes that do just circle, but I think that those are in the minority.
So can you give me the numbers for the bus routes again? I think Route 10 was 316,000?
344.
344.
Yeah.
So just shy of 1,000 people every day.
Yep, and if you look at it, the probably the majority is the Monday through Friday, which it would be over 1,000.
Right, and because of the ebbs and flows and the ways that the bus is used, that's moving a lot of people.
It does.
1 hour.
Absolutely.
And then the number on Route 2.
Route 2 is 417.
And that's between Burlington and Essex.
Yes. And
That's a lot of people. If you do it by 7.
Yes, and we operate 7, but the service or the ridership on the weekends is just much less.
And the operation of hours from 6 a.m. to, or is it 5 a.m. to?
It's route dependent.
Route dependent.
Yeah.
Is there anyone online that I don't see any hands up online? Nope. All right. Clayton, thank you very much.
Thank you
Appreciate
For
it.
your time.
And if anyone wants a great job, $28 an hour to start. We'll pay for your CDL, and I just ask that you like people.
Well, that did it. right, 5F, discussion and consideration of CCRPC. I like to call it UPWP application match. Chris.
Application. Yep. So
I'll try to normalize that at the next meeting.
yeah. See how it goes. So essentially, this is the annual solicitation that CCRPC puts out to the municipalities so they can know what projects each of us would like help with from them. We have 3 projects in priority order. GIS services, that's really both to help out needs both at the community development department and the wastewater stormwater department. Also, we have that is a fee for service project, the GIS services. So the cost of that is split between those 2 departments. The Pearl Street project is the second on the list. That's really to try to look at some short-term potential alternatives between Susie Wilson Road and West Street Extension, because that bigger project is very costly and expensive, and we don't know how to figure out how to get that paid for yet. So this could potentially look at some alternatives in the in-between. Then third, the TV condition assessment of stormwater pipes. This is a number of years in a row now. We've asked for this assistance to basically TV what those pipes look like underground and see which need to be prioritized. So the match and dollar amounts are there in the memo, and the recommendation is to submit these requests as drafted.
Any questions from council? The only thing I want, go ahead, Lane, sorry.
Don't.
I didn't see you. No,
Finish your
I
sentence.
didn't even look over.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm just curious about the Pearl Street project. I recall that the town of Essex was also working on significant changes and upgrades to the intersection of Susie Wilson and 15. And so how does this project interface with that, or does it at all?
So, Regina, if it helps me to answer that, I can. The town of Essex is involved in that project, but that is actually mostly a VTrans project. They have been in constant communication with us about their plans to move forward with that, but they have not actually decided to do so so far. And when they asked us asked the city for a letter of concurrence for their latest design, we actually agreed with the town that they should go back and look at whether or not traffic conditions have changed since COVID, and maybe it's not necessary to have a dual left turn lane over there. Regardless, though, this is what the study that's I'm proposing that we do with the CCRPC. Would focus on using temporary measures, paint and posts, and things that can be more easily reversed if it was necessary or changed in the future. And I think that intersection, if there was a need to further change it in the future, I don't think what comes out of this project would be an impediment.
And their project would not be an impediment to what we're trying to accomplish.
I mean, we would have to be in communication with them about what their latest plans are, but there are ways we could work around it.
Yeah, I mean,
thanks, Chris.
Because back in the day when this was being discussed, they were so intertwined. No, all I was going to say earlier was I appreciate you keeping this moving. The idea of improving that corridor, it's this odd spot that's very difficult to navigate. And I'll just be annoying and say if there's a way to push that up Pearl Street a little bit and talk about, a crosswalk smack dab in the middle of all those new permitted apartments that are coming online in the next 2 years. You can add that to this. Maybe we just do that later. I'm just, spitballing here.
We need a crosswalk in that neighborhood, even if it doesn't pass speed tests. It's
yeah. So anyway,
critical.
Thank you for getting Pearl Street on there. Amber, you had a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I was understanding. So the additional money that we put in the budget, or that the town put in the budget for the assessor, for the GIS, is in addition to the request here for GIS support.
Yes.
Does that make sense? Okay.
Yep. That GIS support that happens over on the town side is very particular to parcel data and keeping up parcel information. The work that both Chris and Chelsea need is much more specific. Chelsea, in terms of stormwater infrastructure and inventories and projects that are going on from that perspective, and Chris much more broadly in terms of trying to look at mapping and zoning mapping and just lots of different scales.
Okay, thanks.
Any questions from council? Anything else? Regina, anything else to add?
No.
Anyone in the room have any comments or questions about this program we're talking about, or anyone online on Zoom? Please raise your hand. I'm not seeing anyone in the room or on Zoom, so I would entertain the motion on packet page 41.
I'll move to, I make a motion to authorize staff to submit the UPWP requests application as drafted.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chris. Do we need a 2-minute break? Is everybody okay?
I'm okay.
Okay. All right. Move on to 5G, discussion of FY25 general fund budget and budget schedule.
Okay. What you've got in your packet is essentially a description of all the changes that were talked about during budget day. Essentially what that does is get us to a 6.9% budget increase and a 7.7% tax rate increase. The remainder of what is in the narrative here describes the other questions that came up from council and what the answers to those questions are. We can certainly take a look, talk about any of that further if anybody would like to. We have also asked staff to ask department heads to think about if there is any reductions that they could think of that could be feasible. I have a list of those that I am happy to walk through for folks pretty quickly, and certainly they come with impacts that are not all fantastic, but happy to walk through that. If that is helpful, then in terms of just big picture and schedule, what we're really hoping for is some direction from the council tonight, because at the next meeting, we're going to have to get to a place that we're comfortable turning around a budget that we are going to present to the community on Saturday, the 27th, just a couple of days after the 24th. I'll run through the changes, or suggestions for potential changes, if that will help.
Sure.
Finance department, there is a $16,000 a year cost for the Questica software. Just very quickly, that is a software we have been wanting to move to for a little bit now. It is been slow to implement because there's been just so much going on. The real benefit of that is that there's much more clear transparency. What happens and what gets paid for, it shows up right that very night. And so it's a little bit more a live stream of where we're at as opposed to monthly financial reports. In the streets budget, we can reduce paving and we can reduce the cost of salt. The impacts of that certainly are that we will just be delaying maintenance on those road improvements. And in terms of salt, we just can't really predict the future on exactly what it is that that we will need. We are looking at putting together a bid right now for a new dump truck. And there are some improvements in that dump truck that really tries to look at using salt more efficiently. So there is that. Again, no way to really be able to define what that looks like in terms of salt savings. In the administration budget, we talked about how we tried to add some funding in there for increased community outreach and engagement. Again, those are kind of placeholders for things that we will likely need, but we don't have specifics on that, so that is an option. We also have the new CATMA membership in there. Again, relatively small dollar amount, but we are not using that now, so that could come out. Obviously, we want to encourage folks to use the bus, so that's the point of that. From the fire department, so they've got I want to say salary, that's not the right term at all, but the wage increases associated with covering the volunteer time. It is possible that we can delay the start of that to January. The downsides certainly are that we really have been wanting to make this change for a while now to get folks paid for that volunteer time, and this would only delay the inevitable. If we reduce this now with a January 1 start time, it just means that this increase you will see next year when you do the budget.
Can I just, you mean this is specifically paying for time in training?
Yes.
Okay,
And
just want to make sure everybody's clear.
I should have started also by everybody's here to help with questions as they come up.
Great, thank you.
Building budgets. So in the 2 Lincoln line, there are some possibilities to reduce a couple of reductions really in 2 Lincoln. That's coming from the concept that we're going to be kind of shut down here and renovating. So there is some potential that we can look at some of those reductions. Again, fairly small numbers, but in the $5,000 range. Park Street School, there's a potential reduction there, but those are, I think this is a maintenance line. Harlan did an awesome job giving me the number, and I'm like quickly not seeing which those lines are, but there were just a lot of work done on that building, and they still have some issues to address. So that reduction would be probably not as feasible as doing those 2 Lincoln reductions. Then on Maple Street, also, I think this is a maintenance line. There is the potential of reducing that by $5,000. The only pressing matter is a roof completion. Again, reducing maintenance costs come with the risk that we don't have that money in hand to do things that may come up that we are not prepared for. And then also just identifying that you do have a general fund transfer of $50,000 that goes into the building maintenance fund. We've had that in place. I'm not sure how long traditionally that's been in place, but again, we've got real costs in our buildings, and so that reduction would be challenging both in terms of the projects that we've got lined up and the future of just if we stop doing that transfer. Again, I'll point out on that one, I would not in any way recommend not doing this transfer going forward into the future. So if we were to not do that transfer this year, next year we're going to see that and it'll look like an increase. There is a potential reduction in terms of a personnel change that I think is fairly feasible. I'm not going to talk specifics about that, but that's probably an about $11,000 adjustment. The library has been looking at some part-time hours. It appears that we had an inadvertent reduction in part-time hours in FY24. So they're trying to look at what's kind of going on there and if we can do any reduction in the FY25 budget or really we've kind of correcting what happened in FY24. They are also looking at some potential software and if there's any reductions that can happen there. So that is the list. I would just say, from my perspective, one of my concerns is the very low unassigned fund balance that we currently have at the end of FY23. So the tricky part about kind of really trying to fine tune and tweak a lot of some of these small numbers is that is not going to help us solve that problem of trying to get that unassigned fund balance to a more comfortable place. I think that's all I have to start the conversation. And like I said, folks are here to help answer questions if you've got them.
So with everything you just read off, being in addition to the chart, the lengthy chart that we got in the packet, page 1 and 2. I mean, I'll just say I'm also a little concerned that for some of these that are, 500, 2,000, 5,000, I'm a little concerned if we're at the point where nickel and diming this,
Right.
I think we've got bigger problems. And as Regina said, we're going to set ourselves up for being overly conservative and possibly get ourselves into trouble. That said, there were some items in that list that we may want to take advantage of that didn't seem like they'd be problematic. So I guess that's where I'll start on some of the bigger ones. There was a finance one, determine correct costs and allocations for finance software subscriptions. What was that? Was that the Questica?
That's the Questica.
Okay, well, never mind then.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's still technically on the table, right? And all of it is.
I would say, if it helps you, do you want me to more say the ones I said that were not so problematic?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think 2 Lincoln, around $5,000 reduction in that building budget is probably an okay one. And there's about an $11,000 reduction if we do personnel change.
I'd have a hard time with that without knowing what the actual impacts
It's
are, which I know you don't want to talk about right now. So I maybe
Mm-hmm.
It sounds mutual and it sounds doable. I don't know if that helps you.
I can live in Vegas for a little while.
Yeah. I'm just gonna, so those are the 2 that you think will have a little impact, Regina?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The other ones I was gonna mention in this list was I'm not entirely comfortable. I know we talked on budget day about reducing the strategic plan implementation to 10. We also talked about the fact that we've got several initiatives underway and likely more, and we've adopted a way that we want to communicate with the community that's structured and spelled out. And if we don't have the money to do that, I don't know what we've just done. So I would say that at minimum, we need to meet that back at half or leave it the way it was. Because like I said, for basically what I said. So it was 50 originally. I would be nervous about going much below 30 on that. Personally, I think we need some ability to do that work. We just did a number of mailers, and that was quite the conversation about how that was going to happen. The economic development one, which is next, the concept of not having money in the budget for a community meal for budget time next year concerns me. But this one HHS assessing in debt, that just looks like something we've just managed to recapture. It's on page 2 of the transmittal in the chart, almost near the bottom. Updated figures from town budget files.
Yes. I think, I could be wrong, but I think that is because of the new tax. Sorry, I can get more detail on what that actually is.
Sounds like, yeah, Okay. And then we've saved, there's 37,000 less, 38,000 less from correcting a payroll, correcting the,
Oh, yeah, that's what that is.
childcare portion, right? Is that childcare?
Yeah, the
new
childcare
childcare
tax.
contribution calculation.
Yep.
And I'm sure Amber's going to talk about this, but I'm pretty hesitant about the capital, changing any of that capital contribution. But we should probably talk about that. So those are my initial thoughts, some of these seem like, but I'm still on the fence about the Questica software. Mind hearing from Jess about how she thinks that might impact the department. Marcus, you raised your hand.
So first on the things that were mentioned earlier, I would say that I'm not in favor of adjusting the start for the fire department. I think that's something that's been needed and necessary for quite some time. I think it's well deserved. And again, as I hear that we continue to, while we've got a great team over there, it sounds like we sometimes struggle to find more people to participate, and I don't want that to be a barrier to anyone participating in the fire department and giving their time. I think they deserve something for that. I do have a question in relationship to the chart about the adjustments that were made. And I probably need a reminder about this. But looking at all the savings that were there, that were made in the adjustment, it all gets wiped away plus some with the transfer to capital. And so I know that we had some discussion about this the last meeting, and I believe, Andrew, you brought this up. You brought up wanting to bring this back. Can I get, if nothing else, a refresher on some of that reasoning? Because it does kind of, and to go back to your point, we are doing a fair amount of nickel and diming to try to bring this down. So it's difficult. And this is a big chunk that wipes out the adjustments that were made.
I'd be happy to. I think it might have been Amber, though, and just as the chair of the capital committee, I think she'd be better equipped to speak to the capital budget issues than I think is a complete sentence.
Thanks, Andrew. As the former chair, you certainly could speak to it.
You got it. But you haven't said much.
I can see you punting that, though. I think that, I'll also bring Jess into this conversation. There is a chart in the materials that shows the amount of money that's in the capital fund and the amount of money that we need to do the work that's in the plan now. And my concern is that if we don't keep along the same path that we are and putting that additional money into the capital fund, even though we have the lot, that we are going to find ourselves in a position where we're having to go for a bond a lot sooner than we thought we were going to, because we have a lot of projects and none of them are cheap. None of them are cheap. And this is just a point in time today. This isn't even like a full list. This is just today. So tomorrow could be 6 other things that need to come in there. And so my concern is that when we originally, and Andrew was on the board, when we started originally doing this process of putting money into the capital fund, it's with this idea that we knew we needed to put X amount to keep accruing to allow us to continue to do these projects. So, and Jess, definitely step in here and, and contribute on the finance part, because I'm definitely going to stumble over that piece. But I think looking at that chart, that's what brings me back to. If we remove that contribution, even having the lot, we're going to find ourselves in a sticky situation.
Yeah, so to add on to what Amber's saying, page 139 of the packet is the summary sheet of the various capital fund balances. So the general fund capital reserve, right now we're projecting that FY30, we will be $1 million short in that fund for those projects that year. So FY30 seems like it's a ways off, but it's really not. And like Amber said, we know that we have more projects that are yet to be identified, or new projects that are going to come up just in the next few years that maybe we didn't anticipate needing to happen as soon as they now need to. The other thing I'll add, I know that the village/city has kind of always taken the approach of paying cash basically for everything, which, you basically land on one of two sides of a coin here. There are people that are all for paying cash and others who favor bonding or borrowing. I will say that the city has done a great job of paying cash, and the advantages to that are you're earning interest on the money that the funds that you're building up over time. You've got the cash, it's better buying power in some cases. And on the flip side of that, if you're bonding or borrowing, you're paying interest on those projects that also is not accounted for in this in these projections. So basically you're spending more money to spend the same amount of money by borrowing for it.
That's why I had them answer.
And I appreciate that. Thank you for that. The other thing I wanna ask about, going back to your comment about the library. So as we talked about staff, my understanding of the staffing levels going into this next budget and the intention of getting there was to have a certain number of people in the library during its open hours. So you're saying that we already got there with the staffing we have? I mean, they've exceeded that staffing level from the last budget? Or I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think as we've been looking at the FY25 budget, it seems like there is a problem in the FY24 amount of part-time hours really in there. And so as Wendy's on here, she can chime in, but I'm pretty sure they're still looking at that to figure out whether the dollar amount that's in there now, the hours amount, is correct, or whether there is the potential for some reduction. So they're taking a look at that. I don't have the answer for you tonight, but we'll look at that.
The other question on staffing is, when we're talking about positions at the library, are we talking about positions that are librarians? And I say that from an educated, I have a degree in library science, that kind of librarian, versus we have people working in the library to do customer service work or other work that does happen in a library besides just a formal librarian. Because I imagine that also comes with a certain pay scale because of that education and experience, which may be different than if you're looking for somebody who's just covering the front desk to handle customer service.
I think we have to assume though that even there, it's a fairly specialized level of customer service that has to have a certain trained in knowledge of. Anyway, yeah,
Wendy, do you want to take that? I'm pretty sure I meant to say that Wendy has no power. And so I think this is her on the phone there.
Yeah, 207.
Yeah, but it's really possible that she might not actually be able to.
This could also be potentially answered later if necessary. So
I think it's where the phone is.
I think that's her too, but she could be having trouble. She's out of power. has been since last night. So,
She can get back to me on that one. That one I don't
Okay.
think is essential to it's just understanding again where these staffing costs are coming from and what's impacting that. The other thing, and
Excuse me for a second, I just had to, she
Yeah.
can't unmute at the moment.
okay, got it. Thank you, Jean.
So, I'm happy to translate.
Should- can she hear us?
stand by for more.
I mean,
Yes.
okay. So, I would think, Wendy, I don't think it's critical that we get this question answered tonight. If you do want to email it, we can go with that, but otherwise we will get it sorted out afterwards. I think the question, if I can summarize, Marcus, is what is the level of librarian expertise that's needed in all of the different positions and in terms of the customer service front?
Yeah.
So she will email you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And just to put in my 2 cents though, the level of customer service, the skill level that is needed in all of those positions is very high.
Okay.
They're constantly working with people from all different backgrounds, and they have to know a ton about all the databases that they offer. They have to talk about just so many things. I'm sorry, I'm not thinking of specific things. If you want to add anything, yeah, there's all kinds of stuff going on. There's an assault there the other day. People have to kind of there's just such a range of things that they need to know and have to address at all times.
Yeah.
Everyone there has a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, except if they're like shelvers or something.
Right.
You
And
know?
I hear that I've heard that before, and obviously I'm aware of the situations that have happened at the library. I think
I'm
one of
not just talking about assault situations.
no, but there's various kinds. But I have to I sometimes start to wonder though if the library is too many things or attempting to be too many things. And I know what it needs to do, and I know that by statute what it needs to do, and I know what provides so much benefit. But I just wonder if there is a line, and I don't know that it's easily drawn, but if there's a line that needs to be drawn about what we can and can't do and the services that we do provide to any and all parties while being open to any and all parties. Right. So it's a difficult balance. So I just want to acknowledge that.
And also that is what a library does.
Yes.
And a robust library has to do that. And that's what makes it so hard.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at the community of libraries throughout the United States and actually throughout the world, the position of libraries and the things that they provide are growing. They've become much more than just a place to borrow a book. They provide access for people to use computers who have no access to online, to get a job, to get in, actually to come in from the cold. We are open to everybody. We are open to provide services, and they seem to be growing all the time. And since, and I've been involved in the library for 25 years, and it's changed dramatically. I mean, Elaine, think about when you were on the board, it's like a different entity there. And it's very hard to say, well, okay, every other library is this way, but we're gonna focus down a little bit. We're not gonna really provide these services. I think the community would not be pleased with that, at least from what we hear from the people that we serve.
And I don't disagree, but in looking at this too, and I looked at the data from the public library database and looking at the other communities also around us. So just for discussion's sake and comparison. And this is taking into account census population data. So looking at communities that are similar in size to us FY25 safe, and again, we're talking about 1.1 for our library, some around there. Sorry, I'm not looking specifically at Essex Junction budget right now. But Williston is looking at an $871,000 budget for their library. Milton is looking at, well, actually in 2024, it was $304,000. Essex is $512,000. Brattleboro, $808,000. Some of these are very close to home. Colchester, $892,000. If we're talking about right sizing our departments, I look at these kinds of numbers and what these other communities who are similar to us in size, similar to us in scope, and I'm sure that all libraries have the exact same mission and intention. I start to ask the question about whether or not we're truly right-sized for our community. That is not to be against the library by any stretch. It's just a matter of asking the question about whether or not our budget really is tuned to be right-sized for the community that we are. So that's why I asked.
Is that we draw people in. People in Essex town come to our library because they don't have the resources at their library that our library has.
But is not the town of Essex also connected to the same network like the home card? Aren't they? Yes. So they have access to the same resources. They may not do all the things that our library does, but they are connected to many of the same references and resources.
Yes, but they probably, I'm sure they don't have the number of books we have. And the number of I mean, I can't speak specifically to all the databases we have.
Yeah.
But we have some, we have many, and perhaps Essex Town doesn't have some of them, so they come to us, so they can use them. Another thing to remember is that our library generates no revenue because it's a library. However, paper costs go up, book costs go up, database costs go up. We have no control over that.
Right.
And we have no way of getting money to pay for that.
Yeah.
Except for taxes.
Absolutely.
And grants.
I think another thing you have to look at is the community that these different libraries serve, and the diversity of the population and the different populations that come in to use the library. And I don't know if that's part of the consideration when you're looking at these different libraries. I will also tell you that it used to be, and I don't know if it's still the case, but behind the Fletcher Free, the Brownell Library had the best research sources in the state. Now that may have probably changed because, the internet and the access to that sort of thing. But we were really one of the premier libraries in the state. And I think if you talk to librarians in the state, they still think of the Brownell as really one of the top libraries in the state.
And I don't argue that at all. And looking at the Fletcher Free, for instance, both libraries, the Brownell and the Fletcher 3, are open about the same amount of hours, according to this reporting. And the librarian hours are exactly the same, while their other staff hours, theirs is significantly higher. So
Can I make an observation? I want us to get away from comparing services offered by the various libraries, because every community is different, and we are all, when I say we, all the libraries, we're serving what's the word? We're serving a mobile community. It is very true that residents from all sorts of other towns come to Brownell. Residents go to Fletcher Free. Like, I'd rather we didn't get down into the weeds about those details. And the main reason for that is because by statute, we have no authority to dictate to that level of detail. So, and we are not librarians, we are not experts, and we are not literally allowed to go down into the level of depth that we've started talking about. And so talking about databases and that kind of thing, I don't think is helpful at the moment. But what I think we could be saying, and some of the statistics you did read out, Marcus, about the various towns and their populations, and that's definitely comparables that we could talk about. But in the end, what we're trying to do is find space in our budget. And statutorily, we can say to the library department, this is the percentage that we need from you. And that is the only thing we can say. And then it is up to the professionals at the library and their board, part elected, part appointed, or self-selected, to make those decisions. So I don't want to get into the discussion of which cuts should be made, because that's not our jurisdiction.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think we have to stay out of that area of specifics. You can reach out later and debate, but they have a board that goes through those things.
Exactly.
That's fine, and I understand that. And I'm not looking to do that here because I think that would just consume far too much time anyway. I wasn't looking for that particular opportunity. If nothing else, what I simply want to say is, based on looking at the data, based on how I'm feeling about where we are with the budget, I'm asking questions about the right sizing of all the departments, not just the library. That bringing up, for instance, EJRP and looking at communities around us as well, EJRP is not necessarily, if I were to do the comparison, again, same communities, right? Williston, this is FY25 budgets. Williston is looking at 652,000. Milton's at 270,000. Essex 1.1. Brattleboro 719. I mean, they're a little all over the place. 816 for Colchester. And they're looking to bond for an additional indoor facility. Williston is talking about an additional indoor facility. I was reminded recently about the pool and the fact that we have a pool that's, beautiful and wonderful and people use it all the time. I don't want to take away those services, right? But at the same time, it's something that we have open 2 months of the year. So I start to go, if I don't like a 7.5% increase to what was said, it has been said to me, and rightfully so, what would we redline? And I'm not saying that we should, but I'm throwing all this stuff on the table to go, let's talk about what right sizing these departments looks like. So
I think you're smart to use comparables from other communities. I think that's important. I think we still have to have conversations. If we're going to have conversations like that about the departments that seem to be the most expensive, we should be having those comparable conversations about every department. So what's Public Works doing in Colchester?
Would you like to know? I've got it.
Well, see, that's what I'm getting at. Like, you've got data that we don't have. So perhaps you might want to share that out so that we could,
happy to
that would be really helpful.
Absolutely.
The only thing I'd like to note on this, if I may, is at some point we do need to make a decision about some of these things, either to enact some cuts somewhere and or provide direction to staff specifically around cuts. One thing, just going back to the libraries, my understanding is that we are allowed to talk about an overall goal. We are allowed to talk about an overall funding level and just knock it down to the nitty gritty. So if there is a proposal for a certain ask, either a budget percent reduction or an overall budget number, we are absolutely allowed to do that, but not X amount of money for whatever service. So just to make sure that we're on the same page there. Along that line, in terms of comparisons, one thing that I would just offer, I would like to venture to guess that we are not exactly the city of Boston in terms of needs, in terms of service levels. The Boston Public Library Service is open 48 hours per week. We're open 58. I really don't think that Essex Junction requires that many more hours of library service than the entire city of Boston metropolitan area, over 6 million. Just for comparison's sake.
You're comparing apples and oranges. I'm sorry.
Exactly.
Well, no,
That's my point.
We're talking about that from two different ways. Again, I prefer, what's happening here is we're beating up on the library.
I'm not done yet. I've heard a couple of things.
And seeing as we don't have the authority to do much more than what you already said we have the authority to, it seems pointless to me to beat up on the library.
So I'm not beating up on the library. I want to be very clear on that. I'm pointing out some facts that some people might not like. And one is that there is a very significant amount of time that our library is open compared to many other communities in our state. I believe ours is open the most out of any other library in the state. More so than the library system within Boston, with the exception of the Central Boston Library in Copley is open more.
Well, let's.
The rest of them though.
Excuse me.
Let's not interrupt.
Well, I'm
Let's-
sorry.
Let's let him finish.
What I'm saying is, in terms of getting to that point of what we can do, is I would propose that our council talk about whether or not we want to have the library come back to us with a budget that would have a library open 48 hours per week instead of what it currently is. So that's something I'd like to see us talk about and agree to or disagree to at some point in time. I'm ready to move on from the library though.
Can I just make one observation?
Sure.
Last one from
I
me.
just
as
don't
well.
want this to become a back,
No, I understand.
Please wait.
I just want to say, instead of I think what our level of direction can be is percentage or dollar amount. And then if the library professionals decide that they are going to continue to provide services to the community with the hours that they're open, and they can do it in the new parameters that we set, that's up to them. If they're prioritizing customer service by doing other things, whatever it takes to meet the numbers we provide, that would satisfy me. So I don't want to be overly prescriptive to any department, to be honest, about what we want them to change, but particularly the library because we're limited. That's all I'm going to say.
I think in any request we make of any department, it's going to be the latter. It's going to be, this is a percentage or this is a dollar amount. I think, though, that it is up to us to be able to explain to the community why we're making the suggestion, and to say, to present an example of we have too many dump trucks or this or that is not out of bounds at all, because we're not directing anybody to do it. We're simply pointing out that there is a discrepancy in X or Y, or we're not doing enough of something over here, and that's why we want to spend more money. No disagreement whatsoever on their authority to decide how to, but it is perfectly valid, I think, to identify the reasons. Simply saying, I think we should ask for X, doesn't really explain to anybody what the whole picture is. Why did you get to that point? I got to that point because of X, Y, and Z. But yes, we need to be very careful about that boundary. Absolutely.
So
why don't you go ahead and continue with what you had started.
So I'm ready to move off of the library.
Can I just, because because at some point we do have to make the decision on what we ask the library to do. So I would like to say that I would like to ask the library to come back with a level set budget.
Okay, great. I want to hear everything Andrew has to say, because I think all of us are going to weigh the whole thing when we come back. So you asked some questions, you went, Andrew, finish what you're doing. We'll come back to the library. We'll come back to everything that's suggested.
Cool. My other one is, one of the things that I know, Amber, you've mentioned quite a bit about is about revenue. One of the things that our recreation department does very well is having a fee-for-service program and a fee-for-service model. And I'm curious as to how many of the administrative positions that we have in EJRP admin, so things like the customer service specialist, I might be having the name wrong or title wrong, the finance specialist, those types of positions that support the enterprise funds and support the fee-for-service programs, are those also paid for through those program funds, or is it purely admin? And if it is purely admin, I'd like to see a switch so that we can be taking advantage of the fact that we're subsidizing those program costs. And I'd like to be able to change that model to align more with like the wastewater treatment plant, Regina, your salary, Jess's salary, and those who go on to support our programs.
Are you
done?
Done. Amber, did you have anything you wanted to add to this?
Not right this second.
Okay. But
I have a further question.
sure.
So can we haven't talked a lot about the unrestricted fund balance, which is quite low. And I'm curious what the target is. I was trying to find the policy on our website. I couldn't find it. So I would love that to be called out in some way. That's a side note, but I'm more concerned, frankly, about the unrestricted fund balance as opposed to the capital balance, because capital, we can move projects around if we have to. But the unrestricted fund balance, if it's not sufficient and something happens, we're kind of screwed. So one question I would have is,
What's the target?
what's the target? But also, what can we do to move towards it in a predictable way so that like the next several years,
Sure.
we know what's going in there until we get to the goal of the target and then maintain it going forward.
There was something in something you just distributed, Regina.
It was in the
forgive me.
budget day. I'm trying to find the.
Page 62 of the budget packet for tonight's meeting is that financial fact sheet that I created. And about center of the page, it talks about the unassigned fund balance, the percent we're at, and what our current policy is, and what the GFOA best practice is.
We're at 7.8% of our total budget. That's the fund balance.
Yes.
And we want to be up to 15.
Up to 15, correct.
Yep. Okay.
And right, and creating a budget that's picked apart, for lack of a better term right now, because it's getting late, really removes any possibility that that will grow.
Right. So therefore, it's even more important for us to figure out a way forward on this.
Right. And the confusing part for me, Regina, was we can't say every year, or well, can we say every year we want to put X amount? Or does it's only allowed to be left over that wasn't spent for whatever reason, either group insurance that didn't turn out to be that expensive enough, supplies that didn't get purchased, that sort of thing, right? We can't earmark to fund balance.
Yeah, Jess can probably speak to this a little bit better than myself, but essentially you're not supposed to like set up your budget so that you're just saving. You know, we're trying to, the point is to set up a accurate and good budget. And I think typically over time, you end up building up this dollar amount that's a more helpful dollar amount if something really does go wrong. We're really just starting from a very low number there. And there's a variety of things that we can do to try to increase that. One is holding vacancies. So if somebody leaves, we can kind of try to hold that position open for quite a bit, not fill it right away. And another way of thinking about it is just not particularly planning for it in the budget, but just trying to be smart in putting the budget together and making sure that you really are covering yourself for needs that you're gonna have. And then if those needs don't happen to come to fruition, then we're able to find those savings. But the idea is not to set that as a goal and put a particular general fund line in to achieve that result.
Thank you.
That said, is that like not a practice that's done at all? Like when you get under the fund balance, are you supposed to do something to get it back up there? Or is it just you leave it to chance and hope that there are some surpluses that you can apply or open vacancies?
I can chime in on this, Regina, if you want.
Please.
Okay. Best practice is that if you fall below your unassigned fund balance threshold, that you do have a plan to get that balance back up. It is not illegal or against the rules to budget to build that balance back up, but it is not best practice. So the hard thing in the city of Essex Junction is that our fund balance policy is very oddly worded. So normally a fund balance policy would say that you want to maintain a threshold of at least 15%, because that's the minimum amount that GFOA best practice recommends. Ours says a balance up to 15%. So because of the way our policy is worded, it makes it a little bit more difficult for us to build up that fund balance and have a leg to stand on.
Sounds like we need to review the policy.
Yep.
All right. So we have one or two ways to proceed. We have before us a list of suggestions that staff have made, both tonight and prior to the meeting, with numbers. We can go through that and identify what we're comfortable with accepting or leaving alone. Go through what Regina brought to us tonight, accept or leave alone, and then get to everything we discussed off of this list and decide how we want to proceed on those things. I think we need a little structure here to get through the rest of this. So why don't we do just that? There's the first page of the budget transmittal, the general fund budget file changes that were proposed. Let's just run through them quickly, and we're not going to vote on every one. Let's get some kind of consensus on what we're thinking. There's the, sorry.
And just to be clear, that this table are the changes as directed from budget day.
Right, and reflected in what we've got in front of us tonight.
Yes.
And not including what you brought up tonight at the beginning.
Correct.
Okay. So making changes to this chart will then obviously change the files we have, and we'll have to ask for, regardless of what we do tonight, we're gonna have new files. It looks like finance, there's an increase of $500 in the budget for the finance line. I don't know that we can, what's that for? Some of these we're gonna be quickly, like, rapid fire asking questions here, I guess.
Yeah, there's those for tax forms that we're, oh, it sounds like Amber was about to say something.
Yeah, I was just gonna make a suggestion that if these are changes from budget day, can we just flip this around a different way as opposed to going through every single one of these and say, did anybody have any objections to these?
Okay.
That were made pursuant to the discussion that we've already had?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's just look at page 1 then. Anyone have an issue with any of this on page 1?
No.
The Questica software is included for finance in that line. Do we want to leave that reduction, take away Questica for next year? I'm just want to make sure we're clear.
Questica is within the budget that you have in front of you.
Mhm.
It's a potential option on the other list that we just brought to you tonight.
So what's the green
I'm just
in the
confused
table
on-
here, the green 13,461?
That's the savings.
Jess?
Green is savings, red is added cost.
Yeah, but is that
Right, but we talked about Questica as a potential reduction more recently, but what is this exact line in here?
So this 13.4 that's in here is I took all of the software that finance uses and allocated out to program funds. So it's NEMRIC. It is, sorry, not NEMRIC. It's Questica, Kofax, and one other. No, it is NEMRIC. So those are the 3 software subscriptions that we have currently. That originally I had thrown them all into the finance budget because I needed to figure out the allocations. Those allocations have been calculated, so it resulted in basically 13.4 of the cost going out to the program funds or enterprise funds.
okay? So that's not Questica the way I was thinking of it. So everybody okay?
No.
Okay, page 1 stays. First part, this is a big one on the top of page 2, capital. Where are we on this capital transfer? You want to keep it?
I do.
Or you want to keep it?
I want to keep it.
Okay.
We need to, but
I know Amber wants to keep it. I'm just guessing.
can it be $30,000 lower? Or can we, is it negotiable?
kind of my thinking. I appreciate the reasoning and I totally understand the position, but it literally wipes out all the savings and adds.
And adds.
So I'm wondering if we can zero these amounts.
I would prefer to leave this one if we're trying to shave off 30 and make the argument to the community at a public hearing and see what they think. If they want us to, look at this. I think we need to keep on track with the capital program, realizing it's wiping out these savings. 30,000 in the grand scheme of things here, I think will hurt us long-term more than it will save us early. But, let's put a pin in it. But it looks like, is that a hand up, Amber?
I was just gonna reiterate how we started this entire conversation, which is the nickel and diamond conversation. $30,000, taking $30,000 off of capital does what to the 7% increase? I mean, I guess that's, if we're trying to get to what, 5%, that is not gonna get us there. So I feel pretty strongly about this, as you know, but I think just taking 30,000 to take 30,000 is really not getting us to where we need to be.
I mean, that's understandable, but also we are nickel and diming everything right now. And so another 30 would add to this long list of green, in the black options that if we keep going, that's part of it. So I'd like to put a pin in it and not make a final decision on that particular one just this second.
So just for clarity, the point of this today though too is to try to have a budget that we can then present to the community for a public hearing. Right. So maybe this can be that pin of, I think this is what you were saying, do we intentionally call this one out at the public hearing and ask the community, is this something that we want to reduce, knowing that ultimately it's going to cost us more in the end?
It's the town meeting kind of question.
Right.
It's the village annual meeting kind of question where we're like, look, we think we've gone through this with a fine-tooth comb. There's one or two things we'd like your advice on. I have another one in mind that we'll talk about in a little bit, but this is, I think, one of them. We feel very strongly that this is X, Y, and Z. What do you think? It will save you X.
I'd be willing to do that.
Yeah. So so let's leave it in for now. It sounds like it. We'll bring it up specifically. ComDev, I'm not seeing anything. The only other one I mentioned on here, well, what's this note? Reduced grant match of 10,000 to 6,000 for updated Pearl Street.
So the original budget that you had in front of you was $10,000 grant match for the UPWP project. Once Chris looked into that a little bit, we're really thinking we only need a $5,000 match for that UPWP project. What you still have in your budget is $6,000 for that match. We could potentially reduce it another 1,000, but it's nice to have wiggle room in case the cost of that scope comes in higher, and or again, very little money for engagement and public outreach, and that could potentially be at least $1,000 to do something.
Okay. And for instance, the mailer we sent out about the rental registry, how much was that? 1,300 ish, ballpark it over this. Don't worry about it.
A lot.
It was a lot.
I'm sorry, I can never hold these.
It's okay. You don't have to. I mentioned earlier wanting to raise the strategic plan implementation figure up. Are people comfortable doing that?
What do you mean raise it up?
Take out less. Maybe leave it at 30 instead of 50. Right now it's been reduced to 10.
No, I'm not comfortable with that.
Personally, I would prefer it go up. Just if we're going to do the strategic plan, the results are not going to be do nothing different, keep doing the status quo. You all are fantastically on point. It's going to be, we want something different, we want something new, and so without money it'll be okay, thanks, wait until next year.
We don't know what the something is.
But this would prepare us so that when the something is identified, that we could do something in this next budget year instead of waiting until July 2025.
But the strategic planning that we have done thus far is so high level that I don't think right now I could comfortably say that 10,000, what is 10,000 going to do? If we're talking about just community engagement, I think 10,000 covers it. Where we would be right out of the initial gate. We will have to have a conversation when we get into the next fiscal year about how that, again, that strategic plan now restructures our our northern direction. But I don't see this money, even at 30,000, is going to take on any major project that may be suggested from the strategic planning discussions that have been had thus far. That's going to happen out of capital. That's going to happen out of public works or some other department that will have an impact on those things. I think that this money will be primarily focused or used in a community engagement way. So for me, I think 30,000 is personally too much, but.
I would add to that to say that depending upon what it is, whatever opportunities we decide to pursue, we can go for grants. We could try something else.
I will ask a clarifying question. I'm thinking of this from a much more global community engagement perspective, not so much strategic planning. So that might be me. If I'm thinking about this in a more global community engagement way, where would that be more appropriately placed in the budget? Do you know what I mean? Like when you and I had a conversation about how to get some mailers out and we're talking about some other things and I brought up this rubric we approved. I want to make sure, my point here is to make sure we're actually able to do that work. And that we're going to ramp up a couple committees as a result of this thing as well. And they're going to need to do, they're not just going to sit there in a room by themselves. They're going to need to be out in the community doing things. And so where does that money, where would that be better spent? I mean, right now I'm thinking of that as that's the proxy for this line. But maybe that's just not accurate. I want to make sure we're able to do some of that and keep the momentum such as it is. Just be able to do what we said we're going to do. Because if we don't have the money to do the community outreach that we've committed and claimed that we want to do, I don't know what the point was of spending the first 50. So I guess I'm maybe conflating the strategic planning process and follow-up with wanting to be able to continue to improve our interactions with the community and our committee's interactions with the community.
I think we might, in this case, have to strike a balance between what we have to do or what we want to do as a result of strategic planning and what we're capable of doing, and perhaps right-size our expectations as to what we'll be able to do going forward, realizing that the finances aren't quite there to accomplish or kick off these really ambitious plans that we have for our future. Like, I think we have to start a little slower than we anticipated, which is really disappointing.
I guess I'm just be more clear. Even if we're not taking item 2B from the strategic plan, we've still committed to improve our engagement, and depending on the project or the whatever we're trying to implement in the community, we've committed to doing it differently, and that will cost money.
Yeah.
So if not under this line that says strategic plan implementation, where would it be? And would it be in the admin or legislative or?
There is a little bit of increase in the admin budget for those kinds of things. And I think we increased community development a little bit as well. Again, they're relatively small dollar amounts in the sense of, like, you try to get out in the community, you need to pay for advertising, you need to pay for signs, you need to pay to give people food. All these things cost a lot. So I'll say, to be clear, there's a little bit added in admin and there's a little bit added in community development. It's not a lot to really.
Yeah, for instance, the next line down is $26,000 savings, but we now don't have a budget for the next year's community meal if we want to do what we're doing at the end of this month. So, that concerns me. I realize we talked about that on budget day, but now I'm thinking that's a bad idea. So yes, fine. If we're deciding, if we're going back up to the strategic plan implementation and the feeling in the room is we don't need to do it? Or we need to slow that down and leave it at just 10 out of leaving it strictly to strategic planning in that line. What do people want to do?
I'm at slow it down and leave it at 10.
Amber? Unmuting.
Sorry, ditto.
Okay. I didn't need to figure out what you meant by that for a second. It's so late. Sorry. What is ditto? Marcus? Andrew?
I just want to acknowledge that, again, looking at the administrative budget with the increase that was put on those particular lines that impact community engagement, there's probably about $20,000, $25,000 worth of increases on this particular budget for those line items. When we're talking about advertising, communications, printing and binding, postage. So if that is an increase based on our actuals now, that's one thing, versus are these increases including the engagement that I assume the community, our communications director, based on what she's previously said to us, is her increased engagement. So I'm assuming that some of this work would be included in what is being proposed here in the administration budget. The legislative budget, which I think also, to address your point concerning boards, probably does not address the additional board, because, for instance, there is a $2,700 decrease because of the fact that it's not assuming the housing. It doesn't look like it's assuming the housing board. Maybe that's on a different line right now, and I'm sorry, I'm looking at this in the moment. But it is acknowledging that this legislative line for the Community Advisory Board, 3 additional committees, determined through the strategic planning process. So this is talking about 3 additional committees and the governance committee, which we have to get up and running by statute. So it would seem to me that some of this is already being addressed in the budget. So in order to achieve that same engagement goal.
So asking about the strategic plan implementation line,
I would say
leaving it at 10, that's my question right now.
Ditto.
Andrew?
I was at 30.
So, no?
We're in the minority.
Okay. All right, stays at 10. For now. I'm kidding. Economic development, remove all funds and pause for 1 year. Note this, there is no budget for a community meal for 2025. FY25. How
we got to have a community meal.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how much of. I don't remember the conversation around how that came up, and we don't have to go down a long road on it. But I think we need a community meal. I just don't know what the difference would be if it's a 5 or a 10 or a. I just don't remember how that particular.
Yeah. So from what I recall, the reduction of the economic development budget was sort of combined with the concept of like just community events shouldn't really be in the economic development budget. They should be in community development or another budget that makes more sense for events. And at the time, I didn't realize that we're using that as a community event this year. So the economic development budget this year is being used to help pay for the community meal.
Okay.
And so without that, and Ashley, I don't know if you're able to help figure out like what the total cost is of the January 27th. I mean, it's a little bit split between two different projects, and we're still sort of sorting some of this stuff out, but we can figure out what the cost of January 27th is going to be, and look at the budget and make sure we've got at least that amount covered.
Okay.
I support keeping it.
Yeah, I mean, we need to keep something. So let us know what that is, I guess. It sounded like we were all good on removing GBIC funding. Okay, GoCo cost enterprise funds. Is there anything else on here anybody has any questions or concerns about? No? Everybody good? Okay, the rest of it stays. And running through what Regina brought up this evening. She started with finance and 16,000 to put off the Questico software for a year. Jess, do you have a sense of, can you give us a sense of what impact that might have on your department?
So Questica, the intention, we've already started working on setting it up and actually transferring all of our data, historical data over from the town. So it's in process, and the program is meant to be primarily a budgeting tool. It's software for budgeting, but it's also, like Regina mentioned, a live tool for reporting. All department heads, all council members, and other select staff would have access to the program. And you can assign different levels. We have an unlimited user license, so we can have as many users as we want. It would also be a great tool moving forward for capital planning. There's a piece of the software that is actually used for capital planning that hasn't been implemented yet. So essentially what this means is you would only be getting the monthly financial reports that you're getting right now. Staff doesn't have a live view of what's going on day to day without this software being implemented. And it's also, just from a budgeting perspective, doing the budgeting through the spreadsheets is fine. It works, but there's a lot of room for error. Questica would remove a lot of that, and it's a much more efficient process. It would take a lot less time because staff would be able to enter data directly into the software instead of having to send me files back to then incorporate everything into one master file. So there's a huge efficiency in going forward with this software. Not to say that it can't be done, but there are definitely some things that we kind of went backwards on this year as far as the reporting goes. We did have the functionality when we were with the town, and this is kind of the last piece that needs to get stood up on the city side. So like I said, we paid for it this year. We're in the process of implementing it. So we would essentially be just abandoning that project. If we decide to go forward with it in a future year, we would incur those implementation costs all over again also.
Chief Royal.
Just one comment to Questica, that piece of software is, at least for us, almost critical at end of year, because it's like, I'm literally in there every single day to find out where my budget is and to make sure that I'm closing out the year without running over. And without Questica, I don't know that I can be as accurate as we are.
Okay. Thumbs up over there.
Not a fan of the, so let's
leave it.
Going.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, stays. Paving and salt reductions in streets. No, good. All right. I don't read my writing very well here. Trying to keep up with Regina.
So admin, just in terms of costs of staff training, CAPMA mentioned as a potential thing that we can reduce. That is relatively small dollar amount, but it certainly is something. It is not a benefit we offer to staff right now.
How much was that? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was looking forward to.
We've got too many computers.
Oh, there's something we can cut. 20.
It should be right here.
2,500.
Yeah.
It's 350 for 2,500 for Katma.
Yeah, it's kind of that whole line. So it ends up being about $6,000.
Yeah. We're not offering that now.
Correct.
Folks?
I-
Nobody wants to be the first?
I know it goes
I use
against
it-
our goals to do bike
know.
ped, but if it's not in there now, then no one's gonna miss it.
Amber?
I'll go with everybody else, but again, it's $6,000. I don't know how it really impacts this.
Well, unless we find some enormous ticket item, this is how we're gonna have to do it.
Well, yeah, and I don't know that everybody wrote this list down, otherwise I'd do it the way we just did it.
Yeah, I
Um,
didn't.
I didn't.
So, right, so this is where we are.
Yep.
So I'd say leave it.
Leave it or not do it.
Leave it in. Anybody else want to go on the record?
I'm taking it, I say take it out.
Colleen says out,
Think you leave it out.
out,
I'm thinking keep it in.
okay.
What did it?
I was in, just to be clear, I'm in.
Okay.
Okay, it's in. Start paying for, training for firefighters?
Yeah.
Delay the start.
No.
No
Oh,
delay.
no,
delay.
no
Do it now.
delay, no delay.
Buildings budgets to Lincoln.
So my question that came up when you said this was, I'm still not familiar with where staff are going to go. I'm assuming a lot of them will be working remotely. But shaving more off this project, I don't know where folks that do need to have a space to meet the public will be. So I'm a little nervous about that without knowing that part. About shaving any more off. I mean, it's not necessarily the same line items, right? I don't know where those project costs for relocation are going to come from. So if we can truly save $5,000 by not being in the building, sure. Do we really need to go to that level? With that level of risk of not having enough to, if it's put off for 3 months, are we going to be in the hole for supplies?
Yeah.
You know, so I just ignore it.
So we have a thought and a suggestion of how and where staff will go. We're prepared to bring that to you when we can bring you a to Lincoln update, which
Okay, we
is
don't have to do
probably
it now.
closer towards the end of the month.
Okay.
I think it's safe to say that Harlan made that suggestion with that in mind.
Okay.
I'm very comfortable with the recommendations that I made, and if we get into the transfer one, that particular budget piece, people seem to be, unfortunately, I'm building a department again, which is what I did when I took over Parks and Recreation maintenance. There was no actual parks maintenance department, and I built it from scratch. Or we built it. Sorry about that. We are in the same scenario with this buildings where it started when we were part of the town.
Yep.
And it was trying to figure out some sort of a need to it. There's not a lot of historical data, but I'm able to use what I've been doing in buildings and grounds for years to try to predict what's going on. That one $50,000 transfer, we have so much going on within buildings right now that money would just go in there and sit there. There are no emergencies or capital projects in line that have to be done in the 2025 year that $50,000 needs to go to. So letting it go for 1 year now. How that line,
Oh, I think we're talking about two different things here.
right,
I was talking,
right now you're talking about just
well, before I was talking about saving $5,000 off
To Lincoln.
Lincoln being vacant.
Yeah.
Regina had suggested we might save a little money not being in the building on supplies. It was a small amount, 5,000.
so out of the administration line, not out of the buildings line.
Let me look at this.
I see where you're going. It's two down on my list, but yeah.
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 Yeah, I think these are the to Lincoln building line, 210, 4120.
210, 4120. So 210, yeah, it's 210, 4120. It's the buildings line. But is it a supplies? Is that a 610 or is that a 431?
431.
This is so impressive.
And I'm very comfortable with
Okay.
removing $5,000 because I am going to have at least 3/4 of the building that I'm not going to have to maintain.
Okay. Let's just do that then, if everybody's okay with that?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, great, good.
That's good.
Okay. What did you have next on your list, Virginia? I saw Park Street School is what I wrote down.
Yeah, so these are both next are the 431 line, Harlan, for Park Street School, and Maple Street. A potential $5,000 reduction for Park Street School, but, you're thinking you're less comfortable with that because you think we'll probably still need it?
I'm weird. Right. Any panic when you ask me to reduce the budget is you're not going to give it back to me the following year. In this particular year, we have just dumped a lot of money back in. We've just dumped a lot of money into Park Street School. We are, again, not in an emergency situation, but there are some things that I'm going to need to address. I don't need to address them in the 25.
Well, you know what, this sounds counterintuitive, but from our fund balance conversation from God knows how long ago tonight, I'm just assume just leave these there and build that up. And I know it sounds weird, but
yeah,
It's also one of those things. If you have a burst pipe,
I know that's kind of what I'm thinking.
I don't want to.
This building is going to be empty. That makes sense.
Right.
Not, shaving off those two budgets worries me a little bit, but I'm just me. And so if other people disagree.
Right there with you, Raj.
I would agree.
Okay,
No,
good.
that's fine.
All right, what's next there? Building fund transfer.
Yeah, so then there's the $50,000 transfer from the general fund to the buildings fund. And for the reasons I said above, but if you were asking my opinion, I wouldn't do this, but.
Dennis says no.
She sold it.
Yeah, I thought we were using a lot of the bulk of what we're transferring to replace the roof of the Brownell Library and the carpeting.
Right.
So can I speak to this fund just a little bit, the way that I believe it's set up and the way, so this is very similar to a capital repairs for all buildings. And the goal is to continue to dump $50,000 into it a year.
Yep.
And then we pick projects and we assign the money to it.
Yep.
Right now, there is money assigned to the roof project. And this $50,000 would not automatically go to that roof project. It would go there and sit there until I present you with a list of projects that need to be taken care of, and then you would assign.
But those could come at any time, and we really, could use the discipline to ensure that this continues.
Believe me, I've got projects lined up that I don't have numbers on, but again, none of them are an emergency.
Keep it.
And I don't foresee them. And we have repairs and maintenance line items per building to cover.
So this will truly sit there, but it will also build.
It will also build and it needs to build. That's why if you needed to take it for the fiscal year 25 budget, it's probably not going to put us behind an 8 ball, but it's got to come back on the 26 budget and it's got to continue at some point.
It's going to be an increase next year.
But I'm just looking at page 136 in our packet, and it talks about we have a beginning balance in FY25 in the building fund of $30,786, adding $50,000, spending $75 on the Brownell roof entrance and carpeting, and then an ending balance of $5,700.
The carpet's in there as a placeholder at the moment. Nothing has been assigned to carpet. And we're looking at changing the way that we approach the carpet replacement project.
So and that note, Elaine, is saying in FY24 is the Brownell roof and entrance. So we would be covered by what we've added
got
in
it. Okay.
FY24.
Okay.
FY25 is, there's a note there for the carpet replacement.
So then we're actually not, it just seems to me that these projects are like specifically allocated and the money's allocated, but what you're telling us now is it's not.
The only thing allocated is the roof.
It's the roof.
The others you're going to see those others pop up. I could verbally tell you some that I have not had the time to put in and enter into this because we don't but it's things that I'm gonna need to take care of. So there are repairs and maintenance lines for each and every building. And then there is this, which is very similar to a capital, where we're gonna accumulate money. We are going to give you a list of projects that the money could be assigned to. They're gonna be the more larger projects that we would not put into our general fund budget.
Right.
And then we will assign money out of that fund to take care of those particular projects.
I'm gonna say leave it.
Yep.
Okay. Amber, does it leave it on this topic? I can guess. Okay. Personnel change.
So, just know there's a potential $11,000 decrease that'll come there. I don't think you need to decide something there.
Okay. All right, let's leave that alone. The next thing I have on my list is, I think that was it. Was that it that you brought extra tonight?
Yeah, I know that the library is definitely looking at some of their software costs. I mentioned that we've got to figure out the part-time hours for the library. That was it.
All right. So now is the time for anyone who has any other big proposals that they'd like to consider. Elaine, your hand is up.
Main Street Park.
Thought Main Street Park was pulled.
Well, we were waiting to hear about the grants and whether we could reapply or apply the grants to the train station.
We have not had those conversations yet with the state. What we did do so far is we have applied for a urban forestry grant for emerald ash borer. That was the grant that we had on the table last month to potentially apply for trees at Maple Street Park. I'm sorry.
Main Street Park.
Main Street Park. So we have shifted gears there and we've been able to put in an application for emerald ash borer. We did that. The conversations about whether we can shift the grant funds that we have right now for Main Street Park to Amtrak, we've not been able to have those conversations with the state. It's a little bit hard for me to imagine that they'll let us shift it, but we will make those asks and sort that out. In terms of your general fund budget and any changes that might happen, it has no impact on the general fund side of things because that's all of the dollars that we've been talking about for Amtrak, Preston Connector, and Main Street Park are in the Economic Development Fund, with knowing that we have to ask the voters to re-up that Economic Development Fund in April, and without knowing if they're going to do that, we are paused and understood at this stage of the game that Main Street Park is not the priority for those funds.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Anybody over here? No.
Thing I haven't already said.
I'm trying to remember what you said. I don't think I wrote it down.
You had a question about the EJRP staff in the EJRP admin budget and if the program funds pay for those staff as opposed to just coming from the general fund.
Correct.
Brad is on here if he wants to answer that question. If he's can't, we can get that question answered for you.
I'm totally fine. It doesn't need to be 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah. Brad.
Yeah, just real quick, Andrew, there currently is not a process by which enterprise funds are transferred to the general fund for EJRP. It's something Jess has brought up, and she's outlined kind of a list of considerations for us to take a look at over the next year. So it's definitely a conversation that's in the works, but it's not something we've been able to tackle prior to this budget cycle.
Is it something that, given the desire from at least for myself to reduce our increase, could that happen for this upcoming fiscal year or for this upcoming budget to be voted upon?
Well, I guess I would say twofold. I would say anything can happen. You all are the drivers of that car. I think where the reason we haven't tackled it is because it's complex. I think it's relatively straightforward, or more straightforward, I guess I should say, in the other enterprise funds. For EJRP, there's a lot of things that are in the enterprise fund that we probably could rationalize should be in the general fund. For example, all of our community events that the community enjoys, you know, are in there and paid for on the backs of other programs, which is totally appropriate, and maybe you all find that's appropriate. So there's some conversations about things like that. I think the other piece is that EJRP, in particular, our business coordinator takes on a lot of roles and responsibilities that other departments don't take on when it comes to accounts payables, receivables, and payroll. And so it just requires a little bit of a different lens. We need to, you know, there's all sorts of different ways, as Jess has talked about, you know, allocating by number of full-time equivalents, or by number of hours, or by budget, or by number of copies, or all of those things. We just also have to factor in some of the responsibilities that we're taking on in-house at EJRP that are not being passed on to HR or finance or admin. So I don't think Jess or I even have a number to throw out to put in this budget. So I'm not sure where that leaves us, other than to say it's been on the radar and it's been heard, and it's something that we can sort out. I'm just not sure if it can get sorted out cleanly in the timeline you're looking for.
Yeah, that was just my ultimate question was, is it something that could happen for this upcoming budget without knowing what those unintended consequences might be, such as other work not being able to be done because of that? I don't know the answer to those questions and would need to have that from you all, which I assume, again, you probably can't do, having only thought of this for the past 2 minutes. So I'm fine leaving that as a, we'll get back to you.
I mean, that's all I have right now. Jess or Regina, feel free to chime in if you think there's a way to fast track that conversation.
I don't know that there's a way to fast track that conversation. We certainly can look at it.
Would it be a similar process to what's outlined in the budget right now with the administrative charges that are applied to all the different departments in the general fund budget? I mean, it seems like that might be a similar, comparing similar processes.
It's not really, because as Brad was referencing, there are a lot of things that are done by EJRP staff that in those the other enterprise funds are done by finance staff. So payroll, for instance, is a huge one. We really just kind of review what EJRP has put into the payroll system. All of that data entry is happening in EJRP rather than within the finance department. So it's just one example of what kind of the offset, where that allocation would be different for the EJRP program funds.
Sounds like a much larger,
big project,
strategic conversation about where we want to be and all that works, but that needs to happen, but maybe not in time. My impression. Anything else from?
Not EJRP related.
Anything else
That
at
was
all?
the other portion I mentioned about the library, between either a reduction of hours or we set a baseline budget.
You had mentioned a cut as well. Anybody have if we're talking about that, is there a dollar target? Because we don't want to start getting into specifics.
I would put on the table that it be 964,134, which is the equivalent number of the FY24 budget.
So you leave it essentially flat.
Correct. Because the increase year over year is 91,000, so that would save us a couple of points. Well, a point.
So is the question, what impact would that have? Or is that just a flat? Is that what we want to do? What are you suggesting? Are you saying I just plain want to see that? How do we all feel about that? Or are you saying I'd like feedback from the library on how that would impact?
I would like to see the library make that adjustment, but I'm, again, totally open to hearing from them. Give me some justification. And I'll be blunt about it in a way that, I mean, it's like the library is in our budget. There are elected officials on this. There are elected trustees on they could run this on their own, in their own vote, but it's not. So, sorry. I just think if they want to have a discussion about it, I'm open to that. But I think that I'm feeling, and again, I will send out what I said earlier, which is some data that I looked up, because again, my question is about right sizing these departments. I don't have specifics. I know Andrew has some ideas, but I mean, I agree giving the department heads the opportunity to use their expertise, come up with this on their own, that's fine. But I think that they should present a level set budget. If they come back and it's not, then give us the strongest argument as to why this needs that.
I would be interested in seeing the results of that, but I also would like to see the same treatment applied to other departments. I'm not comfortable targeting one department because we feel like it's too big. So are there other departments that we feel like we could challenge them to come back with a different budget? And the other thing is perhaps we offer two options: come back with a flat level funded and come back with a 2%. And the range of increases in this budget is from like 1.2% to 48.8. So, you know, different areas. It's not actual department IT, but so I want to be sure that, you know, we're not targeting a department because it feels big, but rather trying to be conscientious about what we're asking a department to do. And are there other departments that we should be having a similar conversation about?
I will answer that question specifically because I have looked at the other departments, and I would say yes, again, through the same lens of trying to right size what it is, recognizing there is some individual differences between us and other communities. So I'm not trying to say we're all the same, but, you know, also looking at, again, where the increases are and how much those totals are and where those impacts are. I mean, again, even from an EJRP stand, I would say I would challenge that particular number, because I think that if I look at other comparable communities, it should be less. But their increase is only $30,000. It's a drop in comparison to some of these others. So then I start to go down the line of, okay, there's $75,000 increase on the admin. There's $80,000 on finance. There's, you know, $74,000 for IT. I don't want to just say, and I level set the whole thing, because again, Public Works is a question for me, and yet I think I don't want to risk projects that need to be done and the maintenance and care of our, you know, roadways and, you know, all that stuff. Stormwater, same thing. But I also asked the question, before this meeting because I was curious about, again, like wastewater treatment. When that utility is set up, what is that going to look like for us? Are we going to be able to get to a point where the the revenue that comes in from the utility, as well as the revenue that comes from our shared partnerships from wastewater, can we get to a point where that's covered by the fees and not having to come out of general fund? In the same way, I think, is there a place where EJRP could be in a place where that can happen? I don't believe so after taking a look at it and thinking about, again, the childhood education, the early childhood education and senior services and other programs that are impacted by it. So it becomes difficult. I'm really not trying to pick on any one particular department, but I think 7% is too much. And I would love to see more come out of this particular budget. I would love to be able to say, everybody taking 1% off or something, and then let's contribute. And I, again, don't want to discount the work that's already been done. I think the staff has already applied some savings in there. Transfer offset that made me feel a little wonky, but I get the reasoning, and I don't want to go back and debate any of those things, but it's hard because, as you've said earlier, and we've acknowledged, right, it is kind of nickel and diming all these departments in order to get to a place where we feel better about it.
My hesitation about going through and saying 1% off from everybody is we just spent 2 hours, it feels like, discussing 2,500 here and 5,000 there, because department heads and ourselves, we're not finding 1% across the board. I think the argument's been made that there might be some wiggle room in the level of service, and I'm just reflecting back, the level of service offered at Brownell comparatively, and I've said this on budget day, our ability to sustain that increased level of service delivery year over year. We are at 60 published hours open for the library versus the average of Williston, of the communities around us that are the same size with similar grand lists, of 48. I'm suggesting that there might be some room there for the library to figure out how can we become a little more sustainable. What is that service level? Is that appropriate? And let the community decide as part of the budget process, or at least in a public hearing. No, you're absolutely wrong. We don't want to do that. But again, back to what you were saying, Elaine, and what we've been advised, I don't want to get overly prescriptive about how they do it. It's just, if we're trying to find room, that is one of the only places after everything else we've described that I was able to find it. Do I like it? No. Do I think that the trajectory the department is on is sustainable? No. I just don't. I don't know how we go have this conversation next year when it's gone up, even 5%. And we can't have that conversation on specifics with them, so we need to ask them to have that conversation and give us and it doesn't leave a lot of time, right? We're up against, we get this on 2 Wednesdays from now. We have to consider it with everything else we're going to talk about that night and make a decision so that we can present it on Saturday. So I'm open to the 2 options, like what happens if you level fund it? What happens if it's 2%? We can start there. I'm just putting that out there because you suggested it somewhere in between what you were saying. This is a painful thing to say. These departments, everything our departments do, our city does, people rely on. People rely on the library. People rely on EJRP, they rely on streets, they rely on fire, everything. So, but at some point, we have to be able to at least ask, what is the impact of this? Is this sustainable? What happens if we do this? And just at least, let's just talk about it. I don't want it to come across as targeting. And I don't know that going across the board and saying 1% from everybody after everything we've been through tonight and on budget day is realistic. I'm just putting that out there. So if you suggested level funding, and you suggested at least give them a couple of options to come back with on impacts, I think that's reasonable. And let's really give them a chance, that Wendy and the board, a chance to really explain to us what that means, because then they're explaining it to the community, and if the community wants it to stay the same, great. So we'll figure it out, I guess, right? And if they want it to change, then it'll change. But so I think is that all? Is there anything else from folks? Okay. Anybody in the room have any comments on everything that's been discussed for the last period of time? Sure, come on up. And I see one hand online, so we will be right with you.
Awesome. So my name is Richard Smith. I just want to, and I don't want to target anybody, but I think we really do. I was really glad to see some of this conversation because it's been really concerning, because I think what we lose sometimes, and I've heard it now 3 years in a row, is I keep hearing we provide services to other communities. And I'm nearly positive the street department came in here and said, I am planning my budget so I can go plow streets in Williston. You'd be really confused about why they were doing that. And we continue to hear certain programs say over and over, we provide services to other communities. And that is not what the taxpayers of Essex Junction are paying for. And it was one of the biggest reasons that when we thought the split was going to be worthwhile, is we were going to be able to focus on our community. And we're still hearing department heads come out and say, well, we're providing these for other communities. That's not their role. And it is your job as the elected officials to remind them of that and tell them, like, when your usage goes down 34% in 5 years, your salaries can't go up 34% in that same time period. It doesn't make sense. A lot of other services are providing more and more each year. They're getting asked more and more, and they're still grinding out. People forget, like, the fire department has a 501c3, so we can buy our own equipment. We're still doing that. Every year we're raffling off ATVs. We're trying to raise money to buy equipment to cut that. I've not seen other departments do those type of things or look at that. And if you're unwilling to tell them they have to start cutting it, they're going to keep giving you those percentages each year because you're just passing it along. And like, it kills me that I literally heard for the third year we provide for other communities that other communities aren't willing to do. It's time for those other communities to start doing those things, or a decision to be made that those services aren't actually needed.
Hear you.
That's all I've got.
I will say, because I don't think anybody from libraries is on, in that case, I don't know if that's what you're talking about, but this is going to be very clumsy.
Yep.
But I think in the world of libraries, that sort of service is normal. And I'm just putting that out there. It's my understanding. It's my experience. We are part of a conglomerate of libraries, really, but I do hear your point. I'm not saying it's invalid. I'm not trying to invalidate it at all. I just don't know if there's anybody. I just want to be able to say that in that situation, and I probably in recreation too, but in that situation, I think it's perfectly the norm for people to roam. And I'm not trying to argue with you. And sorry.
It's the nature of public libraries to serve
So
the public
I just
for
want to
free.
be able to say that for them, that's my understanding, and you know, because they're not here to do that.
I agree with that, but the idea of providing a service above and beyond others because they're unwilling to do it, if that's the truth and it needed to exist, if we took it away, somebody else would pay for it, right? And if that's the truth, that it actually has to be there. And when we're talking budgeting, those are the tough conversations you have to have. Like, maybe you don't need 2 Netflix accounts, right? Like when you're sitting there actually doing the budgeting, because you don't actually need that service.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the room? Annie Cooper online.
Hi, yes, thanks, Raj. I made notes so I wouldn't talk too much. This is just a word out to nowhere. I am a little confused about the capital reserve and what happened to it last year, but you don't need to answer me. I'm just saying from over here, it's super confusing. It seems to have just been used awkwardly. And then delicately, the money that so kindly was extended to people on committees I don't know how that works. I don't know if you set it aside in the budget ahead of time. Like if you do all the math for X number of committees and X number of people, and then it's set aside ahead of time. I don't think so. Is it? It's not like that, right?
Yeah.
It is like,
Yes.
so if I may, my understanding, and it's a conceptual one, it's not a factual one, is that many people say thank you, but no thank you, so that the money can stay. Is there a way to, I don't know, just finesse that so that it appropriately goes to the people who do want it, and then you kind of keep track of where it ends up so it doesn't end up in a slush fund or whatever? Okay, that's just one thing. And then I know it's small though, but what I'm watching is that I'm glad Elaine stuck to the, I hear you, Amber, about the nickel and diming, but I'm glad Elaine hung in there, because these small bits and pieces that you're all are working so hard on right now are adding up in a great way, and I appreciate it. I'm sure the community appreciates it. Like Andrew, I have had for a long time the same question about EJRP. With a total recreation budget of $4,589,033. For a long time, we've been cheering for the fact that EJRP is self-funded. And slowly over the past X number of years, since at least 26, well, since it's come over from the schools, the payments towards staff salaries have gone up from the taxpayers. And I think if you went as hard right now at EJRP as y'all are going at the library, because you're handling EJRP with kid gloves, but you're going aggressively at the library, and I'm a little confused. It's like if you had a couple of kids and you were treating one way and another a different way. It's confusing to watch. I think that the income that comes into EJRP has enough space to be agile. I've seen the head of that department get a lot of work done in a very short amount of time on several fronts. I'm confident that this can be done if pushed a little. And if payroll is happening from EJRP to EJRP and not under the city finance department like all the other staff does, it's a little confusing. It's like it's its own entity. I think if it's going to be its own entity to that regard and that level of business, it does beg a board similar to how, like, if you could go to EJRP the same way that you want to go to the library and set some stuff up and then have a board and the department decide it, I think you'd be in the same boat as the library. And then I do think that, like Andrew is saying, that salaries can come out of that stuff. And what I really appreciate the most, if I had just shut up over the course of so many meetings, I probably would have just come to this with you now here like this. And I'm apologetic that I was so aggressive. I was so frustrated, and that I didn't just wait until we were all looking at the same thing in the same way. So my apologies for my spirited passion in this regard. And I appreciate the conversation now. And let me check my notes one more time and then I'll shut up because I think I'm done. Yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else online. Looking for the memo. If there's no memo.
For executive session, you mean? Or
Yeah, there's a memo for that. So Regina, do you feel like you know where we're at with all of this?
I just want to be clear as to what we're asking the library. It's what happens if you go down to the FY24 budget, 964, 134, and what does it look like if you go to 964, 134, and what does it look like if there is a 2% budget increase over FY24?
Sounds like that, yeah. Yep.
Okay. Got it.
short. Just
Then, yeah, there is a,
I have the motion in front of me.
Oh, go
The
for it.
executive
Please.
session.
Yeah.
I move that the city council enter into executive session to discuss the appointment of public officials pursuant to 1 VSA.
Wait, we didn't do
Can
the
I,
consent
can I,
agenda.
yes, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yes.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. I think we came to that thought at the same time, Elaine. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
Okay. That discussion sounds like good. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion passes. Reading file,
so we,
Councilman,
Our-
comments, sorry.
yep, our new agenda is adjusted
Right,
slightly. Very quickly, charter changes, passed by House Committee on Government and Military Affairs today. So that is moving on in the process.
Nice.
At wastewater, Bernie Fleury is going to receive the 2023 Alfred A. Peliquin Award for Vermont at the New England Water Environmental Annual Conference next week. This is a very high honor. So that is really fantastic. We talked about the damage already. Just so folks know, Raj, Colleen, and I started with VLCT's Welcoming and Engaging Communities program yesterday. So that was a really exciting start to that. Lots of good other folks in the room. So I think that will be exciting. And then we've already talked about the January 27th open house. That's it.
Great. I do not have anything. All right, Amber.
Very quickly, just wanted to give a shout out to Public Works for having to deal with 2 storms in 1 week and greatly appreciate keeping those roads up.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. All right, Marcus, you're off.
All right. I move that the city council moved into executive session to discuss the appointment of public officials pursuant to 1 VSA 313A3 to include the city manager.
Second.
Elaine was louder.
Yep.
My right ear, here's better. Was there,
Aye.
are there 2 or
Come on.
1? I thought there was 2. There's just 1?
Uh,
Or there just
Just
1?
the
All
one.
right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye, motion passes. Great, we're in executive session.
Recording stopped.
We will not be coming back. So you're free to go. Thank you very much.
I think you are coming back,
To make it a
just to be clear.
yeah.
Yeah.